Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the September 20th meeting of the Ashland Select Board. We are returning from executive session. So I call this meeting to order, and our first item is citizens participation. Is there anyone here for citizens participation, either in person or on Zoom? You can use the raise hand function. So I'm not seeing any citizens participation. Okay.
We've let everybody in?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, so I think our first item is Jason Palitsch update on the 495 partnership, and I think we can move ahead to him. So welcome, Jason. Yeah, stand right up there and speak into the microphone.
Excellent. Well, thank you everyone for having me, and I do have a slide deck.
Sure.
Which is visible on my screen, but I'm not sure how it becomes visible to you.
Should be visible here. It's not up there. It's really interesting.
And there's no camera on him. Right?
That's the thing.
Isn't
So
that
the-
usually the laptop podium?
Should be.
Oh,
It's
okay.
on here. Oops.
Yeah, like where is the zoom on here?
Oh,
That's
wasn't
weird. Okay. Oh, the podium's not on here.
It's a meeting without a little time.
No worries.
Is he in the Zoom meeting?
No, we never put the podium one on there, it looks like.
that's-
Right?
Maybe it got logged out. I thought I logged it in before we executive session. That's all it is. It's just not logged
It's just not a easy fix.
So I just have to let you in and then make him up.
Sorry, Jason.
Can people see me? So we're just having some technical issues here with Jason's presentation. We will be coming on as soon as we can.
Come on. It's dark blue, by the way. All right. Is that gonna work for you, Jason?
That should work fine.
Okay. Yeah, there you go.
So long as I can scroll, and let's see if I can. We can. Okay.
Go ahead, Jason, when you're ready.
Thank you, everyone, for having me. So members of the Select Board, residents watching, my name is Jason Palitsch. I have the honor of serving as the Executive Director of the 495 Metro West Partnership. I want to thank you for taking the time to hear an update. For those of you who are familiar with the partnership, an update, but for those of you who are not, I'll give a little bit of background on what and who the 495 Metro West Partnership is. So you'll see from this very bright orange color, which has been our theme color for 20 years now. It's always a quick way to recognize us. But the 495 Metro West Partnership is a regional economic development organization serving 36 cities and towns in the 495 Metro West region. Our mission is to lead the advancement of the 495 Metro West region as an exceptional location for people, businesses, and communities. Our vision is one where our region will enjoy sustainable economic growth, well-stewarded natural and built resources, diverse transportation and housing choices as well. Together, these assets make our region a desirable place for people to live and work. So when I talk about 495 Metro West, what am I talking about? If you look at this, the slide, this purple region to the right, I like to describe it as a diamond to the west of Boston. We are 36 of the Commonwealth's 351 cities and towns. We are about a tenth of the state's population. If we are bounded to the north by Westford, we come as far west as Shrewsbury and Grafton, all the way down to Foxborough, Rentham, and Plainville, and on the east, Wayland and Natick, Ashland being relatively close to our geographic center. We are a public-private collaboration. A lot of economic development organizations are chambers of commerce or member organizations, primarily responsive to business. Obviously, the business community is heavily involved in leading the partnership, but as opposed to being a business-only organization, we are a stakeholder alliance. We are an alliance of businesses, municipalities, higher education institutions, regional transit authorities, chambers of commerce, environmental organizations, developers, folks you do not always find sitting around the same table, coming around the same table where their common interest is advancing the cause of our region. We have a full-time staff of 2, myself and our manager of planning and policy, and we are led by a large volunteer board of directors. We have been in continuous operation for just over 20 years, since February of 2003. And as I mentioned, we're 36 cities and towns located along 495. Our population, and of course, this is a region that has seen pretty explosive growth in the past 2 generations. Between 1970 and 2020, our region grew by 49% compared to 24% for the state as a whole. So this region has seen tremendous growth in just the past 2 generations. It is also a region that is becoming substantially more diverse over 1 decennial census period. So between the 2010 census and the 2020 census, the percentage of residents who self-identify as white dropped by 10%. It is an extremely highly educated region as compared to Massachusetts. And Massachusetts, as we probably all know, is a very well-educated state. 61% of the region's workforce have a bachelor's degree or higher. That number is 45% for the state. 29% have a graduate degree, which is 20% for the state. Our region is a technology and life sciences hub, and I bring no news to folks here when I tell you that. Industry clusters that have a higher presence in 495 Metro West as compared with the state and the nation are IT and analytics, biopharmaceuticals, as well as medical devices. Our region's unemployment rate is consistently lower than the state's, and that has been the case since 1990. We are not without our challenges. Our housing vacancy rate is 4.1%, which is pretty well below the state's vacancy rate of 9.1%. And just about a quarter of homeowners and 45% of renters are cost burden. Housing costs present as a significant economic issue facing 495 Metro West. However, when it comes to when it comes to commercial and industrial real estate, the pricing for commercial and industrial real estate in 495 Metro West is substantially more affordable than Boston or the Cambridge markets inside of 128. So how did the partnership come about? And I won't spend too much time on organizational history tonight, but as I mentioned, for about 2 generations, this region has been experiencing pretty explosive growth. In the 1980s and 1990s in particular, the region experienced substantial residential development, substantial residential growth. However, by the time the early 21st century had dawned, it was certainly arguable whether or not 495 Metro West or even Metro West had established much of a regional identity. Middlesex News changing its name to the Metro West Daily News, as some of you know, is an event that only dates to 1983. And of course, not all of our 36 cities and towns regard themselves as Metro West communities. We do go all the way down to Foxborough, Rentham, Plainville, all the way up to Westford. So certainly there's been some questioning of identity and cultural shift in terms of what region folks are part of. But by the early portion of this century, there was a consensus feeling among business leaders and members of the region's legislative delegation that we needed to have a vehicle to properly communicate the voice of this region. Cities have mayors to speak for them. There were some very well-established chambers of commerce that were speaking for larger regions, but these 36, at the time 32 when we were first founded, 32 cities and towns had a lot in common demographically and economically, but are otherwise split up by any jurisdictional boundary you can think of. Our 36 cities and towns sink or swim together, but they are split up by county, they're split up by congressional district, they're split up by metropolitan planning organization, served by 5 different regional transit authorities, different chambers of commerce, different river watersheds, any boundary you can think of where resources are allocated or decisions are made. This region was split up, and a lot of our communities were on the distant edge of other regions, sometimes not really having their voice heard and having to clamor for resources. So that was a huge part of the impetus to create the 495 Metro West Partnership. By the time the late 1990s rolled around, there were 3 distinct smaller entities that had roughly similar missions, and in 2002, a feasibility study was conducted to explore combining them all, and in 2003, they were formally combined into the 495 Metro West Partnership. As I mentioned, we are a stakeholder alliance, so my board of directors I'm pleased to be served by 52 voting directors and about 30 folks who serve in an advisory capacity. We're quite a substantial board, as well as participating, though non-voting, members of the region's legislative delegation. Former Senator Dave Mignani and current Senate President Spilka were instrumental in the founding of this organization in 2003. Our board of directors, as I mentioned earlier, we are a stakeholder alliance, and our board of directors is carefully balanced to make sure each of those stakeholder groups is represented on the board. So we have seats for business leaders, seats for municipal leaders, town managers, and administrators. We have some of the planning and economic development officers for our cities and towns represented on the board, higher education seats, Chamber of Commerce seats, regional transit authority representation. So our board is deliberately conducted to make sure that all of our stakeholder entities have a voice in governing and leading the partnership. So what are our values? In last year, our board of directors voted to adopt a new 5-year strategic plan for the organization, a 2022 to 2027 strategic plan looking out. As I've talked about, we're 2 full-time staff. We're a relatively small organization as far as advocacy not-for-profits and economic development not-for-profits go. And when the mission is big but the resources are small, it's important to be as strategic as possible with how we use our time and where we focus. So in developing our new strategic plan, we sort of crystallized what areas we focus on, but we also made a point of setting what our values are. And just to go through those briefly, collaboration and innovation, we draw strength from that diverse group of stakeholders that we bring together. You know, we're not just a business interest group. We're not just another group for municipal government. We are a voice for all of these different stakeholder entities where they're collected around the common interest of our region. Economic development is the focus of what we do. We are an economic development organization, but as opposed to just doing traditional economic development work, and I'll go into a little bit more detail what I mean by that shortly, we also make sure to advocate for the region's needs when it comes to a few key issues, including transportation, water resources, housing, and workforce development. Equity and inclusion, our region's growing diversity is an asset, and we envision a 495 Metro West where everybody has a seat at the table. We also know when we talk about complementary growth that a lot of things have to happen in tandem to support sustainable economic growth. We need affordable housing. We need effective transportation. We need water resources that are capable of meeting 21st century needs. And of course, we need to make sure we're making wise use of our natural resources in the region. If we don't take care of our water land, this is not going to continue to be a place where people want to live. And quick spoiler alert, the people who choose to live in 495 Metro West are the region's real advantage. This needs to continue to be a desirable place for people to live if we want to continue to enjoy sustainable economic growth. So as I mentioned, we adopted last year a new strategic plan. We crystallized the plan into 5 goals, the first of which is largely administrative, operational efficiency and effectiveness, sort of an internal look of, okay, we're a 2-person organization that benefits from the services of a co-op student at Northeastern University with a large volunteer board of directors. How do we make sure our internal processes are as effective as possible to make sure we're making the most of staff time and resources? But sort of the 4 key buckets that we put our work into: transportation, natural and built resources, housing, workforce development. These are the broad categories in which we conceptualize and envision the work that we do as necessary to support businesses and economic growth in 495 Metro West. And I'm going to go into a little bit more detail on each. In our 20 years, we've managed to achieve quite a bit. The 495 Metro West Partnership is a huge part of the reason that 495 is recognized as a region. We are not only we were one of the first organizations to combine 495 and Metro West and to use the Highway 495 Metro West as sort of a moniker in identifying ourselves. There are now a few other organizations that make use of that term. We were, along with now Senate President Spilka, instrumental in 2006 in the creation of the Metro West Regional Transit Authority, which has been a huge benefit to the region. We do a lot of advocacy, as I'll talk about a little bit more in depth, around major transportation projects. Some of you who commute or drive to the west may know that the interchange between the Pike and 495 is finally being replaced. We were the squeaky wheel that needed the grease to make sure that got the attention there. We also do a lot of advocacy around the need to improve commuter rail service. We conduct an annual employer survey. and we serve as the official regional economic development organization for our 36 city and town region. That is a designation by the Commonwealth. That's actually a competitive grant program we compete for every year. There are up to 11 regional economic development organizations across the state. Some state funding comes with that, and we compete for that every year to make sure that we're doing everything we can to support the business community in the region. But we are the official redo for our 36 community region. What are some of the work product that we put out each year? And these are all available to members of the public. If you go to 495partnership.org under reports and data, you can access all of this. But every year we put out a report we call Strength in Numbers. This is a pretty brief overview of making the economic case for 495 Metro West. For those who are interested in talking points about the advantages of locating your business or doing business in 495 Metro West, and just to walk you through briefly what some of those talking points are. As I mentioned earlier, this is a region with a very highly skilled workforce. It is a region with very affordable commercial and industrial real estate as compared with points east. And those things taken together mean that if you're located as a business in 495 Metro West, you can enjoy all of the advantages of Massachusetts or the Boston market while having substantially more affordable commercial and industrial real estate. We have access to the eds and the meds. We have access to the transportation resources. I described our region earlier as a diamond, and if you think of it as a diamond, Logan, Manchester, TF Green, Worcester, you've got an airport at the end of each in addition to access to port facilities in Boston. You can have all of the advantages economically of being located in the Boston metropolitan area, but with a substantially more affordable commercial and industrial real estate. Not to mention 36 wonderful communities that people want to live in. As Massachusetts is grappling with some population drain over the last few months, what we are seeing is of our 36 cities and towns, most are still experiencing population growth. That does contribute to the high cost of housing here, which is an economic threat. But part of the reason we are experiencing that growth is that these remain communities where people want to live and make a life, and that is a huge economic asset. Other work product we put out each year, we put out economic and demographic profiles of each of our 36 cities and towns. And I did switch for the presentation. I switched, it was Hudson, but I switched it to Ashland for you guys. But there's a second page. But this is just some basic information we put out on each of our cities and towns every year. It contains information on population, educational attainment, commuting patterns. Where do people in the community live? Where do the people who live in the community commute out for work? Where do people who don't live in the community but commute in for work commute from? Occupations and industries that employ people in the region, and more. And you can, again, access all of these on our website for each of our 36 cities and towns. We work with Framingham State's Metro West Economic Research Center, MERC, each year to conduct an employer survey, which helps to gauge the opinions and temperature of employer leaders in the region and help to communicate those concerns to policymakers. And all of this is publicly available information. We're not a membership organization, so most of what we do is available to the general public and is available online at 495partnership.org. Just to walk through a little bit more specifically, so some of the work that we do, transportation has always sort of been a first among equals when we consider issues that are essential for economic growth where we do advocacy. Transportation sort of asserted itself very early in the history of the 495 Metro West Partnership as an issue needing regional advocacy. And when you stop and think about it, it does make a lot of sense. Transportation, especially major transportation infrastructure needs, are issues where it just doesn't make sense for individual stakeholders to go it alone. It doesn't make sense for individual cities and towns or individual businesses to speak up when it comes to highway interchange or the need to improve RTA or commuter rail service. It has always made more sense for us to speak as a regional voice on those issues, and that's sort of why the transportation issues has always been front and center with the partnership. So what do we do on transportation issues? We do a lot of direct outreach and advocacy to Mass DOT and other policymakers. We engage very actively with the Metropolitan Planning Organization planning processes, which, as I'm sure you all know, but for our viewers, it is through the Metropolitan Planning Organization that a lot of state and federal transportation dollars are allocated. We make sure during any public comment process that the 495 Metro West Partnership gets official comment in support of any projects that would impact any of our 36 cities and towns. We maintain a transportation committee, which, in spite of the use of the word committee, making you think there's some sort of formal membership, actually it's open to any interested stakeholder in the region, where we often invite representatives from Mass DOT or other transportation entities to provide updates on critical projects or work that is happening. And we are currently engaging a working group, and I'm actually going to jump ahead a little bit, but this year in 2023, as part of our new strategic plan, we decided that, in the post-pandemic world, we wanted to refresh and revitalize what are our vision and priorities for transportation in three key buckets. When we talk about transportation, our three key buckets: roadway projects, commuter rail, and regional transit authorities. Of our 36 cities and towns, none are served by MBTA bus or subway. None of these communities, even when you go far east, have access to the subway. None are MBTA bus service communities. So when we talk about public transportation in 495 Metro West, it's commuter rail and regional transit authorities. So we convened 3 different working groups this year of any interested stakeholder to refresh and revitalize. When we talk about improved commuter rail service, when we talk about improved RTA service, when we identify roadway needs, what are we talking about in a post-pandemic world? The roadway working group is the last working group of the 3 to complete its work. It has a draft listing of some serious major regional roadway needs that are going to be highlighted, but part of that is going to be crystallizing the partnership's longstanding advocacy for increased support to the Chapter 90 program and our policy belief that that program needs to make sure that it's keeping pace with costs. It hasn't kept pace with costs for many years, much less with inflation that we've seen in the last few years, making sure we're supporting our cities and towns and addressing their local roadway needs, but also some major regional transportation projects. I talked a minute ago about the 495-90 interchange, but spoiler alert, the interchange of Route 9 and 495 is likely going to make that list. The Speen Street, Route 30, Mass Pike interchange at the Framingham-Natick border is going to make that list. Regional transportation issues of significant consequence. I won't talk too much in detail about this, but this is just sort of an example of our work. The 495-90 interchange was just something that really needed to be redone for a very long time. It has been a high crash location for a long time. Not only is it operationally unsafe for commuters, but also for freight. Most truck freight coming into New England that is not going into the city of Boston itself passes through this interchange. And after they removed the toll plaza, I don't know if anyone actually drives through this interchange, but you know you do a lot of complex weaving just across other cars going in the other direction. And when this project is, so the 495 Metro West Partnership made this project kind of a #1 priority for many years, and we got to celebrate that work formally began in the fall of last year. I keep getting asked when the work is going to be finished. It's not going to be finished until 2027. But when it's done, you're going to see a much safer, more cloverleaf-like highway interchange that looks like a highway interchange you might see anywhere else. And just to put that into context, right now, if you're headed on the Pike West with the intention of going to 495 North, so for example, if you were going to go from Ashland to perhaps Hudson, you would go on the Pike West, and then you would weave all the way around through 2 loops before you get to 495 North. When this project is done, you will simply take a ramp that connects you from Pike West to 495 North. So we're very excited about that. But that is an example of something the partnership has advocated for many years. I will touch briefly on one big transportation project we pay a lot of attention to that is not within our service area but has a huge potential to impact points west, and that is the Alston Multimodal Project. Very briefly, for those who do not know, the Alston Multimodal Project refers to a transportation project plan for within the city of Boston to replace the viaduct that carries I-90, the Massachusetts Turnpike, through the Alston neighborhood along the Charles River. This project is going to take about 10 years. It will likely be the most expensive infrastructure project in state history. This project will not just impact roadway traffic, but the rail line that carries the Framingham-Worcester commuter rail will also pass right through that region. So the potential to impact points west is significant. The 495 Metro West Partnership is advocating aggressively for a Metro West specific mitigation strategy to be in place before work begins. Our sort of #1 concern for this is this project is invariably going to involve some disruption to roadway travel on the Pike. It's going to invariably involve some disruption to commuter rail service. We want to make sure that these are properly staggered, so we're not simply robbing folks in our region of their ability to get in and out of the city of Boston. If you were to pull up the Ashland 495 Metro West annual profile to look at what is the #1 community that Ashland residents commute out to, it is Boston. So we are obviously keeping our eye on that. As I mentioned, commuter rail is also very, very important to us. Our working group on commuter rail completed its work earlier in the year. And these are just some bullet points that give you an example of what we talk about when we advocate on commuter rail. But what are our priorities when it comes to commuter rail? If you look at that lime green map, our region is served by 3 commuter rail lines. Obviously, the Framingham-Worcester line has a station stop here in Ashland. We advocate for safe, reliable service that includes all-day bi-directional service, and what that means is all-day staggered scheduling. That is actually a minor success that we achieved with MBTA during the pandemic, is that pre-pandemic the schedule made a lot less sense, and MBTA is being a lot better about scheduling trains so that they're departing and leaving on a somewhat regular and predictable basis. We know that a barrier to more folks using the commuter rail was the sense that there weren't a lot of midday trains. So if you took the train in the morning, you had some sort of emergency in the middle of the day and needed to get home, you might be prevented from getting back. And so we do consider that a success with MBTA is better scheduling. But also enhanced opportunities for employers to support employees using the commuter rail, including incentivizing employers providing benefits to their employees to utilize commuter rail. Support for expanded parking infrastructure on commuter rail, making sure that all of our stations have adequate parking, that are ADA compliant. Even though our region has a very small percentage of commuter rail stations, disproportionate percentage of our stations are ones that are not currently ADA compliant. So this is a brief overview of what we fight for when we advocate on commuter rail. Regional transit authorities are also tremendously important to public transportation in the region. If you look at this fun map in the lower right-hand side, you will see MBTA service versus a regional transit authority service. Our 36 community region is supported by 5 different regional transit authorities. We are huge advocates of innovation in RTAs and trying to sort of back away from the old hub and spoke model, which, to put that into simple terms, the old RTA model was you had a central city, bus routes that would carry suburban commuters in and out or around certain well-populated neighborhoods in a city at fixed intervals. And the reality is that commuting and employment patterns are changing as such that those predictable fixed route services just aren't meeting demand the way they used to. We are big supporters of the state supporting RTAs, funding more demand response service, which are app programs similar to Uber and Lyft, but a lot more affordable. And we are very, very excited. We've always had a great working relationship with MWRTA, which, as I mentioned, the partnership was involved in founding. Very, very excited to work with Jim Nee and his team. As I like to say, if you were to look at our map, I call it the Hopkinton to Hudson connection. If you lived in Hudson and wanted to get a job in Hopkinton or vice versa, could you use public transportation to do it? Most people say no. The truth is actually yes. You could go into downtown Milford, get a bus to Framingham, switch buses over to Marlboro, then switch onto a shuttle. We have a transportation system that was very much designed to meet 20th century needs, and it requires a lot of innovation to meet 21st century needs. We know that commuting patterns are changing. So to make a long story short, the 495 Metro West Partnership is a big advocate for financial resources for RTAs to explore better ways to connect commuters to their destinations. I'm looking at the clock and realizing I'm abusing my time a little bit, so I'll try to go a little faster. Other areas where the partnership does a lot of advocacy: water resources. Water resources are essential for economic development, especially in a region that has a lot of life sciences and businesses associated with the medical community. I bring you no news when I tell you that life sciences facilities, labs, R&D facilities have much higher water needs than a typical Class A office space, for example. New England has very old water infrastructure, and I bring you no news as select board members when I tell you that maintaining and updating water and sewer infrastructure is not cheap. So we always make a point of advocating for increased investment in the Massachusetts Clean Water Trust. We are supporters of what's called the Invest in Water MA initiative, which is a coalition of business advocacy organizations that are fighting to see a lot of more federal infrastructure dollars used to support upgrading water infrastructure. And we are also very much engaged with the EPA's process on residual designation authority in the Charles River watershed. I believe most of Ashland is in the Suasco, but you do have a tiny little corner in the Charles River watershed, so some of your businesses may be very interested in that. There's a section on our web page that where they can access some information on that, and we would be happy to engage with them. Housing, as I mentioned, is also something that's emerging as a substantial economic threat to our region. This is a very affordable place in terms of commercial and industrial real estate, but it is a very expensive place to live. That is a direct economic threat to the region because the substantial economic resource we bring to bear is our very talented people. This is a place where businesses want to be insured because this is a place where people want to live. We have a very low housing vacancy rate. It is very important for this region not only to create more market rate housing, but also to diversify its housing stock. It's not just an issue of affordability, it's also an issue of making sure that folks who might want to work here have options other than detached single family dwellings. Our housing committee is actually something that launched just in 2021, and we are at the early phases of identifying a set of policy priorities that we think are good consensus priorities that all of our stakeholders can be on board with to advance the creation of more diverse types of housing that more folks are able to access. As I mentioned, we are the regional economic development organization for the area. Everything we do has economic development as its ultimate goal, but we also do some of what I call traditional economic development work. We support businesses in locating sites in the region. So if there's a business that's in the region that's looking to grow, a business not in the region looking to come to the region, we would help them identify a site that might make sense to them. We work with our cities and towns to help them identify priority development areas that they're interested in seeing developing. We never promote one of our municipalities at the expense of another. We will offer an interested business everything that's available, and it certainly explain to them, what goes into coming into a particular community, help make introductions to municipal officials as necessary. We support regionally significant industry clusters. We provide technical assistance to businesses, and that can be everything from, I heard about this grant program from the state, how do I apply, to, we have a regulatory question and I'm not sure who gets this question answered for us. That's really everything under the sun, kind of trying to help folks navigate municipal government and state government to the extent that we possibly can. We obviously work very closely with all 36 cities and towns, but I like to think we have a special partnership with Ashland. Ashland is a rare community that actually has 2 members on our board of directors right now. It is not the case that all 36 cities and towns get a seat. There's only about 10 seats for municipalities, but obviously Mr. Herbert is currently serving in a municipal seat, but your Director of Economic Development and Community Outreach, Beth Reynolds, is also serving in an economic development seat. Last year, we launched what we call the Planning and Economic Development Working Group, mouthful of a name, but it is essentially a monthly informal gathering of the planning and economic development officers from our 36 cities and towns. It's a 1-hour gathering each month. There's always a program topic, but there's an open section of the agenda for folks to bring up anything they want. The idea being our planning and economic development officers for the region, we wanted to create a formal setting for them to collaborate in. I'm pleased to say that Ms. Reynolds is actually one of the co-chairs for that working group and helped to lead its development. And of course, in FY22, we were, as part of our redo grant, we had a one-time quick turnaround opportunity where we were able to attach projects to our grant application for FY22. They had to be quick turnaround, one-time economic development projects. We were pleased to help secure funding for the town of Ashland to support Montenegro Square, $75,000 for improvements, including the seating and landscaping. You see the photo there that Beth sent me of the finished work product. And I do just want to pause here and note why Ashland was able to take advantage of this opportunity. As soon as we got word of the opportunity, we put it out to all 36 of our cities and towns. It was a really quick turnaround. I needed all of the information within, I'm going to say a couple of weeks. It honestly might have been a couple of days. Not all of our cities and towns were in a position to take advantage of that opportunity. All of our municipalities structure their planning and economic development roles different. Not all of them have an economic development focused person. Some of them, all municipalities, the work versus the staff is substantial right now. Ashland, in the way that you have conceptually thought about supporting businesses in economic development and having Beth in that role, Ashland was ready. And that's why you were able to have an application in and take advantage of that. So that was an opportunity that went to all 36 of our cities and towns. But when all was said and done, I want to say 9 of our communities were able to actually successfully take advantage of that opportunity. So I'll just close by noting how are we supported. So about 1/3 of our funding each year comes from that competitive redo grant from the Commonwealth, but we are primarily funded by support from private businesses. We call them investors. I have here up on the screen just some of the companies that financially support us. Cities and towns also participate as well. Each city and town is annually asked to contribute $500, which of course is very helpful in supporting all of our operations. And so that is, I could do this for about 45 minutes if left unchecked, but I know you have other items on your agenda. And, let me just close by saying, as I mentioned, we really enjoy our partnership with the town of Ashland, but a few months ago I stepped off after my 3rd term as a member of the Shrewsbury School Committee. I know that this is a very difficult time to be a municipal official. In my day job, I get to work with a lot of municipal officials, and I just want to say thank you all for the work that you do, because this has been a difficult moment in the history of leading a city or town, but just throughout 495 Metro West, we're blessed to have a lot of really thoughtful, really caring leaders, and Ashland is certainly among them. So thank you, and I'm happy to take any questions you might have.
Sure. Mike, did you want to say anything or add anything to that?
No, I think, this is, we had wanted to bring, different organizations in that had a regional focus, because I think over the last few years, we've really kind of become a little insular in kind of our thoughts and our focus areas. And so Jason and the 495 partnership was certainly kind of first and foremost amongst those. I'll just give compliments to Jason. Everybody remembers, or I think most people remember Paul Matthews, the previous executive director, and he did really, really great work. But Jason's really, I think, kind of taken the organization to the next level, and I've always complimented you on your strategic planning work because it's not just like the goals and everything. I mean, he's got it broken down to metrics and really, really detailed, but it's that nice balance between detailed and doable. And so just have to commend you on that.
Great.
So
Thank you.
Thank you. So questions, comments, you want to start with Claudia? Or
Okay.
anybody else?
Thank you. That was my first really in-depth look at the group, and I really appreciated the information that you shared tonight. I particularly liked the thoughts about transportation in this area and how it really has changed in terms of what the needs are of people to be able to come and go, and so that's very interesting. It'll be, I'd like to see how that develops over time, and the housing issue, right? I mean, it's a huge problem in the area. So, and I appreciated some of the facts and figures too. I might be going on your website to get those look a little more closely. So thank you very much.
I hope you will.
Great. And Brandy, we just go in order here.
Sure. Thank you, Jason. That was a good presentation. There's a lot of ground you guys cover the breadth and depth is significant. It's funny because having a sort of a regional perspective is really good. We hear all the time in Ashland that Ashland's experienced a lot of growth, and there's too much growth, and there's that we hear from the state that there's not enough housing, and we grapple with trying to how do we grow in a very thoughtful way. But it's also interesting when you start looking at it from a regional perspective, and it's like, we are not the only ones that are experiencing this growth, and I think that context is really important. In fact, Yolanda and I are on working with Michael and our town planning staff on a comprehensive plan, and we looked back 20 years at the last comprehensive plan, and I was looking at it to see like what we had accomplished and looking at population growths, and we realized that Ashland's in line with the region. Like, we are not growing at a crazy pace, and I think that that's important to kind of have that context, because I think people lose sight of that. My question for you, I mean, I have a couple questions, but I'm going to keep it short. But like, when you talk about housing, do you see housing as sort of like the biggest challenge in the next 5 to 10 years? Because how are we going to continue to allow people to first of all, the housing, to have as much cost burden on residents as we do, and there's really no end in sight that I can see as far as like the cost to buy a house in the Metro West area and in Ashland in particular. But do you see the housing as sort of like the biggest challenge in the next 5 to 10 years?
I would, without a moment's hesitation, say yes. I started this job 5 or 6 weeks before the pandemic. And when I started this job, I would have said transportation was the #1 economic threat to the region. We still have substantial transportation challenges, but it is now very clearly housing. To your point about growth, I like to say, there's no such thing as a static population. There's no municipality in the United States that has the same population today or as it did 50 years ago, or if there is, that's an astounding coincidence. You're either a community where people want to come or a community where people feel like that they're going to leave. There are challenges that come with growth. I don't want to minimize them. Expensive housing, traffic, it strains on municipal resources. There are challenges that come with growth, but at the end of the day, you're a community that people look at and say, I want to live there. I want to be a part of that, and that's a wonderful advantage. When it comes to housing, we are, as I mentioned, at the early steps of trying to find some consensus priorities that all of our stakeholders can be on board with. It can become a very controversial issue, and one of the challenges, to be quite candid, from an organizational standpoint for the partnership, we speak to policymakers more than we speak to the general public. We're a small organization. You don't read about us in the newspaper all the time. We don't buy advertising. When we speak for the region, we're speaking to federal and state policymakers on behalf of the region. We don't typically speak to the general public. And what is becoming clear is that when it comes to housing, who is the missing stakeholder at the table? It's the general public. Local governments are saying we got to do something about this. The business community is saying we got to do something about this. And you can talk to folks in the community about that, and there's sort of a broad understanding that housing is important, but when it comes down to specific proposals, projects, or developments, that's where the rubber is kind of not meeting the road. So that's going to be a challenge for us. Is who is the stakeholder that needs to be brought on board with the housing conversation? It is the general public, and organizations like that hasn't been typically where we've operated. That's going to be a challenge.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jason, for your presentation.
There we go. I want to piggyback with what Brandy had mentioned. Housing is very important to me. I'm on the Affordable Housing Trust Committee in town, and I'd like to call it, as we have a favorite saying, called workforce housing. It's a little bit different than affordable housing, but we feel that it's necessary at this time. Older folks, they want to downsize. They want to stay in the area. They can't afford to. You know, even though they're getting top dollar for their home, what they're looking at, what's available on the market, is not appropriate for them, or so they either have to move out or they rent, and it's just not a good scenario. So, you know, workforce housing and affordable housing, they're almost mirror images of one another, but there's some extreme differences, and hopefully the organization that you're working with and run hopefully will help out with this and give us as municipalities, you know, some insight and clear paths to, because right now builders are making money and they don't want to leave anything on the table, you know. So when it comes to affordability, that's not in their scheme of things at all. So.
And we're not seeing those starter homes like you might have seen a few generations past.
Right.
When those starter homes come on the market, because there's so much in demand, the price at the end of the day
Shoots
is
up.
not a starter home price.
Absolutely.
So, and so Ashland is far from alone of our cities and towns facing that.
Thank you, Jason.
So I'm fortunate, Jason often attends our Metro West Regional Collaborative meetings, so since he's been at the partnership, I've gotten to know him a little bit through our Zoom meetings and in person. But this was a great presentation, I think, certainly for Claudia, who's new, but also for other people, to really understand how you work with the municipalities. And I know your partnership with the Regional Collaborative has always been very positive and very supportive. And I know I've always looked forward to your day on the Hill that you guys support. So thank you for this presentation, and hopefully our public now understands a little bit more about what you do and can use your resources as well. And as a business owner, I also fill out your survey. So
Thank you on both counts.
Yeah, thank you, Jason, for coming. It's very helpful to meet with you, you know, get another review of what's going on with the 495 partnership. One of the things I think, because you talk about there's a ton of things of importance to us that you went over today, and so I guess what I'm or be aware of our efforts here, you know, so for example, I'm on the MBTA advisory board for commuter rail and the commuter rail committee, and so, you know, we advocate for a number of things with team management, but I haven't come in contact with any of the things you described that 495 partnership did. You know, I realized when we talked about the MBTA schedule and they started talking about clock facing, which I think is another term for what you were advocating for. I just didn't hear that term. So it would have been, I didn't hear about you guys and what you're doing there. So I think that would have been kind of, you know, useful to kind of coordinate what we're pushing for or advocating for. And so, you know, so in terms of, I know there's a ton of different things going on here and we have representation. So I'm just thinking about how we can coordinate, like, you know, Joe's interested in housing and maybe getting resources for that. I'm involved, a number of us are involved with the MBTA commuter rail. And I was glad to hear that you're really looking at mass transit, because, you know, when people think of 495, they think of 495 and all the cars and that kind of issues. So I'm glad to hear that. But so that, I guess that would be my thought, thinking about coordination or, and it sounds like Yolanda's, you know, MAPC is in, the Metro West Collaborative is in touch with you guys, so that's great. But just think about how we can work together or maybe close some of those communication gaps, I think. you know. So-
Certainly, and you know, when I think of our role when it comes to commuter rail and RTAs and roadway projects in particular, we're the advocate on the outside as opposed to the decision maker on the inside. And so while we do a lot of work directly with MBTA, with Mass DOT, and you know, we have great relationships with all those staff, folks on the inside have sort of their priorities and what they'll talk about, and we have that sort of outsider perspective of pushing. So for example, you know, about 2 weeks ago, we had a convening of our roadway projects working group, the purpose of which is to identify the next 10 years worth of major regional roadway projects. And 3 different Mass DOT staffers all signed up, and I told them all, we'd love to have you on, but you're listening only. This is not for Mass DOT to tell our region what they think needs to happen. We know we can access that information. This is for our regional stakeholders to communicate back. And so, you know, certainly when it comes to our role with them, we do a lot of work with them, but as opposed to being the one on the inside calling the shots, we are the voice pushing for our region and always try to be. I will say that of communities, as I alluded to a little bit, Ashland is definitely on the more engaged side of our 36 cities and towns. They're all engaged at different levels, and a lot of that comes to capacity. We do have, of our 36, Ashland is the 13th largest by population. We do have some pretty small communities that have pretty limited staff resources. And in those cases, it does tend to be sometimes us reaching out to the community a little bit more than vice versa. It's like any organization, there's joining and then there's actively participating. And I will say that Ashland, and you know, it's easy to compliment you because I'm here and we're on camera, but I mean this quite genuinely. I look at, you know, Yolanda's involvement with the Metro West Regional Collaborative, Michael and Beth's involvement on our board. I see Ashland not just having a seat at the table, but using its seat at various tables and speaking up for the community's needs, and not all of our municipalities are doing that at an equal pace. And again, that's often a capacity issue. I don't mean that to be an insult, but Ashland, in my 3 years of experience doing this job, Ashland doesn't just have seats, it uses its seats.
That's great. And so if I was interested in knowing what you guys are doing with commuter rail, how would I find out about
Great question. So anyone is welcome to join our email list. If you go to 495partnership.org, we do not send out more than 2 or 3 a month. If you've ever wound up on some organization's email lists and they're sending you stuff every day, that drives me up a wall. So we make a point of not sending them out more than a few times a month. But as I alluded to briefly, I was talking about our committees. Most of the events and meetings we do are actually open to any interested stakeholder. Most of the time, you can sign up directly on our website. There's an events and committee meetings page of the website. So we'll use the term committee to describe our housing committee, transportation committee, but really participation is open to any interested stakeholder. We'll do some recruiting work to make sure we've got good representation and balance amongst our stakeholder entities, but any interested party is pretty much always welcome to engage, and getting on our email list is the best way to keep up to date.
And would you be interested in coming to the commuter rail subcommittee meeting, or these are Zoom meetings with the, you know, of the MBTA? Is that something that, well, something to think about, you know, because we're looking for input about what's going on with commuter rail. So if you have a certain perspective or thoughts, that could be, you know, a helpful thing, I think.
Happy to. Our MO is usually to pitch at the most senior level, so we do tend to work directly with MBT, but I would be absolutely happy to.
Interesting. Yeah, okay. Think about that. Thank you. Anything else for Jason? It's been a very helpful presentation. Appreciate you coming in person to, which is, I think, I mean, most people like people coming in person. I'm a little, I could take it early, but anyway, it's good meeting you. So, well, yeah.
Come in and you can take it.
No. I'd appreciate you on Zoom just as much. I just want to say that.
I would say we're headquartered in Westboro, right near the 495-9 interchange, so I can go down Computer Drive and take sort of the back way into Ashland. So Ashland is right down the road, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, thanks for coming in person. That's very important to us.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you,
Good
everybody.
seeing
Have a
you.
great night.
Yeah, thank you. All right, so I guess we got to keep moving here. Yeah, right. Uh-oh. Okay, that went a little over our presented time, but I think that was useful. Yeah, right.
Wait, but there was no time limit for that.
That's right.
No time limit.
Who did this agenda?
It was
He
pretty
did. No, that was good.
It was
Yeah,
productive.
that was good.
And the website is really informative.
Yeah, it seems like it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I know I do.
I'd probably get them and
Yeah, select board, yeah.
don't read them.
Just
but
keep going
yes.
through. Yeah.
Yeah.
They have good programs sometimes too. Before the pandemic, they were offering, I went to at least a couple of them, that they do a day on the hill, where through the partnership, so everyone from the partnership, from the cities and towns gets invited to go up to the State House, and that's been always very interesting.
Great. All right, I think if we could move on to old new business, and that would be the update on Cadillac Paint Park. The subheading, discuss a name, which I think was Brandy's suggestion.
Yeah, so our contractor, well, one of our contractors on that project, Brown, they're still working on the paths, and those have been laid out, and they're put in place. They're putting in the stone dust where it's the section that's ADA compliant. They've done that and used the polymer that similar to what we did on the Riverwalk, and have compacted that. After Brown is done, so Lynch, it was our paving contractor, is actually going to come in and they will do the parking lot. Also at that time, DPW will, install the buttons and the lights at the crosswalk, get that all set. We're going to do some more cleaning around there as Brown has done a lot of their work. They've actually dug up some things, just trash stuff. Take care of that, and then we'll mow it for the winter, and then prep for doing, seeding or whatever we need to do. Our assistant planner, Alvaro, has actually had a light bulb moment, and he is about a potential use for the park or specific type of use. And I think it would be really, really great if he came to the board in a couple weeks and presented his concept and idea. So.
All right, so.
Does it
go ahead.
conflict with all the conversations we've had already about the park and, pollinators and just a walking area and not a lot of active, but?
Very much in line
Okay,
with that.
okay.
Very much in
put
line.
together a number of.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
No pickleball.
Pickleball, here's a thought. Other questions, discussion, or thoughts?
So a timeline for when the paths are going to be open, is that going to be are we going to plan to have that open for the public before the spring, or are we thinking?
It should be ready in the fall.
Okay.
Really?
I mean, people should be able to, we're probably talking about late fall, but,
Oh, that's
yeah,
exciting.
people should be able to access it. It's not going to be, I think, the fully manicured.
Well,
Type
not
of-
until it's all completely
Exactly.
seeded
So
and stuff.
we're talking about an opening, or?
There was someone brought a concern to me that there's a lot of poison ivy at the front of the park. Are we doing
Yes.
anything to try to manage that or remove it, or?
So we'll look at that when DPW goes over there to mow and look
Okay.
at doing some of the cleaning. There is a bunch of poison ivy
Yeah.
at the front, but I think it still has that old, chain link fence.
Yeah,
as
some of the
part
stuff
it.
is still there, so, okay. Okay.
Will that be removed eventually, that fence, or is it gonna stay there?
Yes, it will.
Stay there or get
No,
removed?
get rid.
Oh, okay.
We'll probably have to put something in its place, but
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not a huge fan of chain link. I'm even less of a fan of dilapidated,
Dirty,
messed up
rusty
chain
chain.
link.
Yeah.
So,
Even rubberized, galvanized chain link
Yeah.
would work. Because
Better.
It's very difficult to spray paint in between to write things on.
very
That's
true.
true. That's true.
But
So,
Yeah,
do
agreed.
you have a time for substantial completion? When you say it's open this fall, that's not completing everything.
you should be able to access the paths and everything this fall, and
Nice.
the parking area.
Okay.
I don't know if we've actually determined what we would consider substantial completion, Rob. That's a good way of framing it and looking at it.
The gardens
We can
and
put
stuff.
something together, yeah.
So one of the things I think we would talk about tonight, if there's gonna be, how the ceremony of the opening would work, but it sounds like it's a little early for that.
I think it's something that we could potentially do this year. Let's take a look at it when they kind of get
Sure.
done, and see if that's something that we want to do.
And you-
I will say some of this, if we want to do additional things, we've really kind of expended the $100,000 that we
Yeah.
received from the state. So we'll probably have to look at, CPC funding or something like that. I'm really excited for you to hear Alvaro's presentation.
Okay.
Of
And so that's, what, I
Concept.
think, a couple at our next meeting, or think
Yeah,
about
he can
that?
do that at
Oh,
the next meeting. Well, I told him, if you're supportive of that, he would have to do it at
Yeah,
the next
okay.
meeting.
So we're meeting in early November.
October, it's only September.
I'm sorry, early
You
October.
missed a month there, Rob.
Damn it.
It's okay, he's just moving
Yeah,
along.
I'm moving ahead here.
And then Brandy had brought up discussing a
Yeah, so
name for the
let's-
park.
Let's talk about that.
So I've talked to a few folks, and you know, when we talk about Cadillac Paint, because we refer to it as Cadillac Paint Park, and
Mhm.
it's the worst name ever. So it really is.
So people know where it is.
People know where it is, but I think it deserves a new name. I know that Ed Hart, who has been the driver of this project, and he's the first to say that you know, it's been his whole community that's been behind this, and you know, we appreciate all of the residents on Nancy Drive and that area that have advocated for this, but I really do feel like, you know, this would not have happened if it wasn't for Ed Hart. So I know he doesn't want the park named after him, but I feel like we should acknowledge his contribution to this in some meaningful way, but I don't know how the rest of the board feels. And if we don't name it Hart Park, we do need to come up with another name for it. So I didn't know if there was any ideas from the board.
So I saw Ed when Brandy and I had select board hours at the farmer's market on Saturday, and we were talking about it. I said, yeah, we want to discuss a name, and many of us really like the idea of Hart Park because of the work that you've done into it, spelled H-A-R-T for his last name. And he's like, oh, no, I don't think that's necessary. I said, well, why don't you see if you can get some input from the community? So he did send out an email. He has an email list, and he copied me. So I have a few recommendations. One was health and revitalization territory. That's just a very big name, but I think people are looking at this as a sort of restorative park that you can just go walk and sit. The other two that sort of got some feedback was because we're going to have pollinators and hopefully butterfly plants and things like that. A few people said butterfly loop or butterfly park, but a couple of people also said that they really like the idea of Hart Park. And this is one of those things, and I think I agree with Brandy, that even though Ed may not want it, I think for our community to understand the amount of time and effort and the consistency that he has had in making sure this happens. He's been there since the beginning. I remember meeting in someone's green area with Ed and Tony when he was our town manager, and we were getting the EPA funds to get rid of the buildings and all that. And then continuing, just Ed really, when we talked about, do we want to put the dog park there, and him sort of galvanizing the neighborhood to talk about it and get ideas. So, and the ideas about the pathway and what kinds of flowers. So even though he may not want it, I really like the idea of Hart Park as well. And if we don't want to do it Hart, H-A-R-T, so, you know, it's not his last name, it could be H-E-A-R-T, right? Hart Park, a park that people would love and that the neighborhood can support.
You could, oh, go ahead, sorry.
No, I was just going to ask the other thoughts on this. Yeah, go ahead, Joe.
The idea of having Ed's name on it is a great idea for all the time and effort that he's put into it. Some brief history that goes way back before some of you folks were even in town. There was a young lady, Sally Lannis, who was part of the senior citizens group down there. She lived off of Sheffield Drive. Sally was a driving force to get everyone's attention to what was going on at Cadillac Paint many years ago. And it was her dream to clean that up and put something out there. And I know that Ed and her had many a discussion with respect to that. Yeah. And when Ed asked me about, you know, what ideas we should, you know, do up there, I says, well, if we don't name it after her or name it in some way, where there should be at least a bench with her name on it or a kiosk on it too.
What was her name?
Her name is Sally Lannis, L-A-R-N-U-S. And she lived on Sheffield Drive. It was the third house on the right-hand side. She had this yellow Cadillac that was a bomber. The thing was huge.
Cadillac.
It was a
Was already
Cadillac.
there.
And she never drove. Everybody had to drive it for her because she didn't drive. Her husband passed away. She never drove. And so people would drive her around in the Cadillac. Long story short, if Ed's really serious about not having it named after him, we can always, I was just thinking about it earlier this evening, and I said, well, we could call it Sally's Dream.
That's interesting.
Just another thing to throw out there. I mean, you're right, Ed had done a lot of work and prep, but there was, the initial kickoff was Sally getting everyone's attention, saying, hey, we gotta get rid of this place. We need to get rid of it. We need to make it vibrant again. And so that's.
Another idea that just came to me is the Larness Hart Park.
There you go. That was.
Both of their last names, to sort of the beginning, the person who started it and the person who helped finish it.
So in terms of this whole process, are we seeing,
Or Sally's Heart.
are you
there
guys
go.
seeing that this is a name that we would come up with and decide at our meetings, or this meeting, or another, or do you
Well, I
see
think-
like
I
a
think-
public process where we do something to,
Well,
get
what I
names
would
or-
say is, I mean, we could put it out there to get a lot of names, but I like the idea
Or a
of,
process of
if we
picking a
have
name.
one or two names, put it out to the public. Michael can put it out in his town manager newsletter. I can ask Ed to send it out to his neighborhood and say, these are our couple of suggestions, and get feedback.
yeah, I think I'd
And
feel
then-
better if there was some sort of
Yeah.
public process.
Yeah, I mean, there are some people who are like, who will have no idea because they don't really know where Cadillac Paint is, or they'll have no interest. But I think
No.
for those who are interested, if we can give them a couple ideas, I like the idea of Sally's Heart. That's, I think, really good. Or Larness Heart Part, one of those. I think, I like the idea of combining the history.
Yeah.
Before you get like wedded to park,
Okay.
like I
right,
said, I
well,
think
listen to,
I would encourage you to listen to just Alvaro's presentation.
Should we
Okay.
invite Eddie for that, Ed?
I think that's a great
Yeah.
idea.
Yeah, definitely.
We should
I
have him
think
come
that
in
is
for
an-
You're
that.
gonna do that at
Absolutely
the
good
first
idea.
meeting in October?
Yeah.
Okay.
Or November, I forget which one.
Well, if we want to get some stuff done this
Yes,
fall, we're
right.
gonna wanna.
So,
I'll
October,
have
yes.
to-
Yeah, I think
Um,
Ed, having Beth be there, and some DPW
Yeah,
members.
I will not be
DPW?
watching the meeting.
Yeah, because they're doing a lot of that.
Oh, okay, sure. The only thing, I don't know.
Especially 'cause that's one of
Claudia,
our
did you have
island
anything
days.
you wanted to say about this process?
No,
So-
I threw up my own suggestion.
Okay,
I think it would be nice to probably get some community feedback,
Yeah.
maybe with some options, but I was also,
a naming
About-
contest.
if this gentleman has some ideas about the park, they might be helpful
Yeah,
to hear
so we
what
can
those are.
continue this discussion. I always kind of assumed it would be named Cadillac Paint Park, and the reason, I think that's in some ways fitting, because look at what it was and what, it's been turned into through a lot of hard work, and that's, I think, an important bit of history that we should consider retaining. That's just how that's how I think about that area, and, but, it's a name, so I think Cadillac Paint Park has some, people know what happened there and what we did to fix it, or what was done to fix it, and look what it's become.
I think sometimes if we're gonna name things, I think that we should probably provide some history somewhere, right?
Yeah.
Whether it be in the
Oh,
park
that's
or,
good point.
so that people know
Sure.
why things are named after individuals
Yep.
or whatever we're
Yeah.
naming.
Yeah,
I think it's important because years later, people go, why is
Yeah,
that
what's
named?
this
after
Yeah, I
me?"
would,
Right?
I would agree with that. I
There's
think if we have,
important history there, yeah.
I think
Yeah.
if we
So I think that could be
create
part
some
of.
kind of kiosk that says
Yeah.
sort of the history or how it all happened, so that when people come there, they know how we got this
Yeah.
wonderful space.
Maybe we can get Gustafson to make one.
I was gonna say, very similar to 433 Chestnut Street with the kiosk.
Yeah, it's a good
Right,
one.
right.
It's a good one.
So now people know.
Yep.
Okay, so enough on this one. We have
Yep.
kind of a plan.
Yeah.
We'll be thinking about how to do a public process, and we'll be, invite some folks to the next meeting in October. Okay, thank you. So the next item on the agenda is the Community Choice Power Aggregation Program. And Michael, this is what, your kind of annual presentation, or is there something special,
Well, there's-
unusual that happened, or?
There's a couple of things I want to talk about with relation to this. First is kind of our new rate that's going to be coming into effect in January. But what I want to start off with is there's a growing. Let me back up. So this last round of the aggregation program, what we had done is we had selected two different products. One, kind of a mixture of, traditional brown and green energy, and then one was going to be a 100% renewable option that people could take advantage of. So so that has to be approved by the DPU, and the DPU has just dragged their feet on this for years now. And it's not just been happening to us. It's been happening to other communities too. So there's been some growing frustration there. And then now DPU is talking about doing an investigation of, the aggregation program itself or the overriding statute, and really kind of, from, my perspective and some of my colleagues' perspectives, really kind of taking local control away from the municipalities and determining what's best for the municipalities, and really kind of having one of those top-down approaches. So I just wanted to make you aware of that, and I'll have some more details soon. There's going to be a couple, Zoom calls associated with it. But anyway, that's the first piece.
Do we think that there is pressure on higher-ups from the energy
Eversource?
companies to
Yep.
say, we don't want you changing this or looking at this? Okay.
I do. That's my
That's
gut.
unfortunate.
That is my gut.
Michael,
So
could you give me a kind of a,
an overview of what
Yeah.
of what aggregation is?
yes,
for the
please.
public as
Yeah, that
well.
would be
Sure.
perfect,
Thank
thank you.
So the aggregation program has been, electricity aggregation program has been established or authorized by the state legislature a few years ago. It's probably a decade ago now.
Quite a few.
And what it allows communities to do is to go out to bid on behalf of its residents to secure competitive or better pricing from other companies than what they might get through the standard Eversource supply rate. And so the concept is that the more, it's bulk purchasing, right? So the same reason you go to Costco, you buy more, you get it on a less, cost per unit basis. So, and that's generally what it is. And we have made out so well with the last contract. So residents have been paying 10 cents, 10 and a half cents, when Eversource was at, 24, 25 cents over the last couple of years. So the savings that we've accrued for residents is getting closer to $10 million, over the time period that we've had it. So that's in a nutshell what it is.
Yeah, I actually was recently doing some research and saw that we were paying the 10 cents, and it is pretty amazing. It's significantly lower than what you'd be paying if you weren't part of the. Now, how does a resident participate in that?
So you're enrolled automatically. You do have the ability to opt out if you choose. There's a lot of communication that goes out via mail, and we have communications on like our website that shows people how to opt out. But again, you're automatically enrolled as
And
part of it.
so, do you know what the participation rate is in Ashland?
I don't have the exact number, but I'm pretty sure it's over 90%.
Uh-huh. And why would someone in general, why do people opt out?
So they might have a contract with the supplier themselves that
So
might
like
be at a
solar
lower rate
panels
at the time. There could be a situation, and it hasn't happened to us, where we're kind of upside down.
Yeah.
And for, Eversource changes its rate, and all of a sudden, we're now higher than the Eversource rate. Of course, at that point, we would communicate that out to the
Right.
public too, and encourage them to, make the best choice that they can for their households. So,
Michael,
Thank you.
What's the typical timeframe that the aggregate company will allow a citizen to be part of it? A full year, or is it 6 months, or 3 months?
so the contracts range from 6 months to 3 years, in various intervals in between 6 months, 12 months, 18, 24.
The only reason why I asked it, we just got a Eversource bill the other day, and I was reading that, our usage is 12.5% lower than last year at this time. And it said the company who we buy our electricity from on the bill. So I looked at last year's bill at this time frame, and almost the same amount of usage, but it was $200 more. So how is that a savings?
Oh, that's a, you know what? You get 2 charges when you get your Eversource bill.
Oh, yeah, you get a supply bill, which is like, okay, it's the same, yeah, and then you get the delivery.
Charges,
Oh, yeah.
which is not part of the aggregation program.
Yeah, you could
Yeah.
go.
You think?
So,
So, I'm sorry if I
without
missed
looking
this.
at your bill, Joe,
Yeah.
that's what I would surmise.
Delivery charge, and just, it gets you coming
Hmm.
They're gonna make up the money somehow.
Oh,
They go.
of course.
Well, I'm sorry if I missed it. What's the trend? Is it going down? Are we more competitive than Eversource, or is
Well,
it just going back and forth?
we have been extremely
Yeah.
competitive over the last 3 years.
Yeah.
We didn't make out as well in this pricing scenario. And I should, so what we ended up with is 15.8 cents, which over a 24-month period. But that also includes, so in terms of clean energy, that's, so Mass has a requirement, state of Massachusetts. I want to say it's 25%, it might be 30%. Rob, you might know this better than
No,
I
I
do.
don't remember it. Clean energy.
Plus 25%. So, if it's if the Mass requirement is 25%, it's what we have
That's good.
elected is 50% clean energy. So there really wasn't that much of a difference between.
Yeah, so far it's been
clean
pretty
and-
competitive.
So Eversource changes their rate. So they changes their rate twice a year. And so this last round for the winter, they dropped it down to 16 cents. I do expect in January, when they get ready for the air conditioning season and everything, that will go back up again.
So 15.8 is gonna be our new rate as of January? Okay.
Correct. So still better, but
Not quite as much of a difference.
And that's the
Yeah.
mixed, what did you call it, the brown plan? or-
so that is the for a clean energy, from a clean energy perspective, that includes the Mass requirements plus 25%. So,
All right, so that's-
and these are Class 1 recs, Rob Muhlenbeek, if you're watching. So,
I didn't realize people had contracts under, like, I just signed up years ago when this started. So what are contracts in terms of that?
well, there are some companies out there who are suppliers, and
Oh, they're the
they,
alternatives.
yeah, they offer, alternative contracts.
And
All green
but they
or
have a
solar
year's,
or-
whereas members of the public who signed up for this or stayed in it are just in it, and there's no contracts getting.
Correct.
Okay,
Correct.
so that's okay.
And
yeah,
it's
go
an
ahead.
opt-out,
Yes.
right? So everyone automatically gets put into it unless you say, no, I don't want to do this.
And that does lead me to my next question. Are you seeing any issues with these kind of predatory power suppliers and their practices? Because it seems to be kind of a recurring issue. And,
Yeah.
there's,
So the only complaints that we have actually received have been more from people going door to door and just kind of that practice, if you will. Haven't necessarily seen anything in terms of predatory.
So it was a big statewide issue last year, and I know the senior citizens are very concerned about, there's a lot of preying on senior citizens for this sort of thing, so.
Yes, well, sometimes you could end up signing a contract that has like a rate of 8 cents, for the first 6 months, and then goes up to like 30 cents
Yeah.
for 18 months, and you're locked in.
Credit card.
So
Yeah.
I guess that's good that we're not hearing about issues, so maybe I know the Attorney General was cracking down a year or two ago about it, so, okay.
Yeah. So that was my update on that one.
Very good.
Then-
All right, anything else on community choice power?
Nope, nothing else on
All
that
right,
one.
so I guess the next one is sidewalks, and that was, Claudia had asked a question a few weeks ago, and then that kind of reminded me of our discussion last year about sidewalks, so just wanted to hear. And Michael, you had sent an email about the sidewalk, your kind of sidewalk plan, so I thought it was worth talking about, what we're talking about with sidewalks and, especially on an interim basis, because I presume sidewalks are going to be part of the comprehensive plan, and you'll come out with a list of, I guess, recommendations at some point. But in the interim basis, I thought it would be good to just discuss what we're talking about with sidewalks and how maybe it's related to complete streets and things like that, so.
Well, good question, and since I sent that email, there's, we've had a little bit more information about the West Union Street sidewalk. I wish it was good, but it's not. But generally, our plan was to do West Union Street this year, High Street, finish, the High Street section next year, which would connect the network of northern sidewalks with southern end sidewalks in a place other than downtown. And then the following year, do Cedar Street. So the board had allocated $250,000 for High Street, $250,000 for West Union, $250,000 for High Street, and that's through the ARPA funds. So did meet with Doug last week, and he's anticipating construction, and I think he's being conservative here, for just the West Union Street sidewalk to be around $650,000. So, and that's,
And at one time.
fortunately, he doesn't think we'll have to do some land taking.
Well, one time we talked about multimodal path there,
That,
potentially.
yeah, that does not look good because of the utility poles and the amount of takings that we would need to do. So, if we do a multi-use path, the poles will be right in the middle, essentially, of the path. Whereas if we do the sidewalks, they'll still be there, but they'll be more on the side.
Are these are typical kind of inadequate sidewalks? They're like 3 feet wide and,
5.5 feet wide.
no, that's not bad.
But, you see a lot of the sidewalks around town have asphalt
Telephone
berm
poles.
and asphalt, it's asphalt, which really
And
is
there's
just
no-
not the best way to do it. Right.
Well, and it
Exactly.
deteriorates a lot quicker
Very
than granite curbing and. yeah.
So this includes granite curbing and concrete sidewalks.
Okay.
Okay.
And a couple crosswalks.
And
Okay.
what was the price of the cost?
$650. Now, we are looking at grant funds. So Evans put in a couple grant funds, including an ADA, an accessibility one. And we'll just have to figure out what to do with the rest.
That's okay. So one of the things we worked on probably like 4 or 5 years ago was our complete streets project list. And I know sidewalks on West Union was part of that. Is it time to sort of regroup and relook at that so that we can make sure that we're getting not only what Evan has found out for grants, but there's always complete street grants
Right.
available and.
It's lining up, Yolanda, because really the last project of that first round is the painting on Summer Street, the bike,
Okay.
the bike lane or bike
And I know
Shero.
the third stop sign at Elliott Street was part of that project, it was part of that
And that was
initial
done.
review.
But the last one is the Summer Street piece, and once that's
Okay.
done, we would be eligible for another round.
Okay. So when do we expect that to be done? And is it time to reconvene? I
This
mean, I know it
year.
was myself and Doug and Sheila at the time. I mean, I'm willing to sit back again, but are there other people as stakeholders that it would be good to
Well, I think,
start
if
thinking
we're
about
talking
that? We had
about,
the consultants, and I don't know that we need to go that far, but,
yeah, I mean, I think if we're talking about doing it for the purposes of finding grant funds for existing projects, that could make sense.
okay.
If we're talking about, additional projects, we'd have to go revisit our list and stuff.
Right, well, that's what I mean, looking,
Yeah, we
well,
had a
it's sort of
long
a
list.
two-step process,
It was a
right?
long
It's
list.
grants for the projects we've already identified, but also then looking at our list, and we had a long list, we just only could, I think we only were able to submit for, the top 5 or 6, and like all the sidewalks on Fruit Street and all those ADA compliant, that was all part of that, so.
Yeah.
We'll probably look at that as part of the comprehensive plan again,
We
I would
definitely
assume, right?
should.
Like-
We might, but I think a lot of that would go into more detail than what we look at the comprehensive, I mean, I think the comprehensive plan is a little bit higher level.
Yeah.
And then maybe this could go part of that, so maybe we start as a comprehensive plan and then separate it out
Are we-
afterwards.
Are we looking to still be able to do the sidewalks on 135 this
We
year?
have to.
Yeah.
I mean,
We've heard from so many people that it's
Just
just,
from the-
Wow.
From the students.
Yeah.
have to.
My ears are ringing.
Yeah?
Really? All of a sudden?
Joe, we've been
It's
talking
not
about
all of a
this for a
sudden,
while.
we've been talking about
For a while.
Route 135.
Yes, we have.
Yeah, so.
And we talked about it at the retreat. We talk about,
Yeah.
so, okay. We go back to the traffic study committee and we bring that information up. And, okay, well, we're waiting to hear back from what the town wants to do. I said, I already thought that we already had this discussion and we were gonna be working on it.
Who's,
I'm not gonna drop any names. I don't throw anybody under the bus. You know,
talking about
you
West
know I don't do
Union, Joe?
that. Yeah.
But I think it's a financing issue, right? Because we originally had to put 250 in the budget, and now we actually have a plan and a scope, and it's 650,
so, I mean, we're currently in the process of doing the design,
Okay.
so.
So we
On
did,
that-
we talked about at our meeting, and one of the things we brought up was, you know, can this be a multimodal path, because
That, you brought that up, and
No, I
I
know.
didn't think that was a good
Well,
idea
I
because
thought
it
that's-
was.
it was part of the discussion, right? To
I'm
be able
just
to
saying we had that
extend.
Looking
discussion.
at, we were
The
looking
trail.
at as an option.
Right.
Yeah.
I get that, but in the meantime, as we discuss this, time is fleeting, and our kids are still walking on the side of the road on 135 to get to school, and winter is coming. So if you add this all together and you look at the formula, there could be an issue. I'm not saying there will be, but there's a potential of an issue of somebody getting hurt, and we're trying to keep that from happening. And I've said that, if not once, 100 times, so. That's all I'm saying.
I don't think anybody's disagreeing, Joe.
Well, I understand it's, we have this ARPA money, we have other monies that are available. Let's just utilize it, let's get it going.
Joe, you can't just drop a sidewalk somewhere. You
I know
have to
there's an engineering
engineer it.
design, but we've been talking about doing an engineering design, and I know Doug's up to his eyeballs in other projects, and I get that, I understand that. But this should have been a priority a year ago.
Joe, it was, that's when you appropriated the money.
And
If I could just jump in here too, I think that, first of all, I mean, I obviously wasn't involved in any planning for what sidewalks got done when, but I would certainly think that sidewalks that are for approaching schools when children aren't, eligible for a free bus, that those should
Yeah,
take
right.
priority. So, I don't know that High Street would fall into that category. I think you mentioned that as the second one. I mean, I think it would be great to put one on High Street for a lot of reasons. But I think priority should be given to sidewalks that, again, are for students who approach a school. And then, in terms of 135, I mean, I think that the traffic on 135 has probably changed somewhat dramatically in the past, I don't know, 10 years, whatever, but it's pretty bad. And, the kids coming out of, say, Olive Street or Edgewood, and I have a granddaughter who's involved in this, so I just want to put that out there. But the children coming out have to cross the street so that they can walk towards the traffic. So now they have to, not only do they have to walk along 135 without sidewalk, but they also have to cross. I have a video that I actually took last year that is I happened to drive up behind the kids when they were crossing, and I sat there for a few seconds. I was like, nobody's stopping for them. And so I recorded it. It's 1 minute and 30 seconds, even after I started recording, before anybody stopped to let them go across the street. I do not believe that people were doing that intentionally. I think they thought those kids were trying to take a bus, waiting for a bus.
And there's no crosswalk there.
There's no
There's no
crosswalk,
crosswalk,
there's
yeah.
nothing.
Okay,
And,
so we gotta.
you know,
do it.
it's just we need to do something, and I don't think that I understand you can't drop a sidewalk, right?
Right.
It's a dual issue.
But we need to do something in
Did
the
a
meantime,
crosswalk at
because
least.
those kids
Yeah.
are having to, I mean, some of them use bikes,
Yeah.
right? There's some bikes, I know that Mrs. Magnani is,
She's-
crossing guard there, so she has an information in terms of numbers of students, but there are certainly several. And then, I mean, are there alternatives for now, to either putting some kind of a temporary crosswalk there, putting something along the side of the road? I know that, I think I had mentioned at some point about when you get off of 495 now in Hopkinton, they have all those, orange, they're not cones, they're, I don't know, stanchions maybe would be the, I don't know.
Yeah, you're talking
but,
about the
yeah.
Milford has the same thing now.
Yeah. My
You know, I don't know if something like
That's
that could be
interesting.
utilized
That's
to keep the kids, but, again, it's a problem when it snows. It was a problem last year when I watched them working on building those houses on 135, and now they put up some fences because they're under construction, and it pushes everybody further into
Out
the road.
onto the roadway.
Yeah, sometimes the traffic is actually beneficial because it forces people to go so slow sometimes that at least, that's not
That's
a
a
terrible
tough
thing.
one.
Unfortunately, the traffic is on the traffic that would slow drivers tends to be on the wrong side of the street.
My
So-
understanding is that they're gonna put there's gonna be a bus stop there now at Edgewood.
A permanent or temporary?
I don't know the answer to that, but.
Which street?
At least temporary, Edgewood
Edgewood.
on 135?
Where's that?
Right next to
Right
the
next
state
to the
park.
state park road.
Yeah.
Oh, on that side of the road. Yeah.
I'll double check on that, but that was
But-
my understanding coming
But
out of the
Michael,
last.
so you
traffic
said
light.
that we're moving forward with the West Union Street sidewalk. So what's the timing? When do we think?
Figuring out, Doug's timeline is go out to bid over the winter and then break ground after the marathon 2024.
Okay.
So would it be, oh, that's right, we have to wait,
Yeah.
because we can't do that work.
Yeah.
It's tough to work.
So would it be possible for us to talk to the school committee about doing maybe a temporary pickup for those kids during the wintertime? If
My
in
understanding is
fact-
that's what's happening. That came out of the last traffic safety committee.
That conversation,
It was a
came up,
conversation, but
there was no clear,
we didn't make a decision that we were gonna sit down and talk with them about making a temporary stop for those kids for the winter.
Well, but
Somebody
how
was
many of those
taking the
kids
ball and
want to
running
take
with
the
it.
bus, right?
Well, that's the other issue, but.
and I mentioned that at the traffic study committee, probably none of them.
Right, so putting a temporary stop there does no good if they don't want to pay the bus fee to take the bus.
Well, I think
Right?
if they were, well, first of all, if they're gonna put a bus stop there because of a safety issue, I don't think they're gonna be charging anybody.
Yeah.
Right? I think if you.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I would, yeah, that's,
Be problematic.
So does the scope of work, I know we had talked about putting in a crosswalk over by the community center as well. Is that included in this too?
So crosswalks are included. I don't know the exact location.
Okay, but,
Because that's going to be
but
more the
still.
engineering.
yeah.
was the design to be on the eastbound side, heading
I think they're
towards?
looking at that, Joe, as-
Okay.
as part of the design.
Okay,
seeing
because
which
there
one
is a
better.
sidewalk already a third of the way down, and I think it stops at that 24 carat
It does.
nursery there. So, from that point on, they would still be, walking on the roadway from that point to Indian Spring Road.
But then you'd still have to have some kind of a crosswalk.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
But you still need a crosswalk, and it would be ones that, solar power,
And
so
then-
people would see the stop or
And
whatever.
potentially a sidewalk also on the the community center
Center
side.
side, right.
Right,
Well, I don't think this is going to have two sidewalks going down.
right, but you
The
need to
street.
get, I don't know that you want I don't know that you want the crosswalk right at Olive and Franklin and 135.
I don't either. I don't.
Right, so
don't
if
think you
anything,
do.
so I would, if they're coming from Olive Street, there's a sidewalk in front of the community center, and then somewhere there is the crosswalk to the other side where there's already a sidewalk.
Yeah.
And
And
then
I'm
it's just
nervous.
extending the sidewalk.
I'm not an engineer.
Right.
So, but just, I'm nervous about putting a crosswalk there.
Yeah.
It's like
Gotta think about it,
positioned,
yeah.
especially if it's going to be one of those hawk signals. People come flying around that curve
It's
Yeah.
a tough corner.
sometimes.
Yolanda, to your point, I think that's an interesting idea, is what if on the eastbound side, the sidewalk really only went from, say, the community center to, or not
Olive.
the crosswalk, the sidewalk, and then to the where it currently ends on the westbound side, and then you put a crosswalk there.
Somewhere in the middle, yeah.
It moves the
And I would
crosswalk down,
think-
it makes it much shorter distance that you actually have to create sidewalk.
And I would think that the Traffic Safety Committee could take a look at, right?
Oh, that's
Similar
interesting.
to what they did for Cadillac Park, right? In that they looked at where is the best place to put the crosswalk and the most line of sight. I would think there at that intersection, you do a similar kind of thing. Determine where is the best place to put the crosswalk for safety for people to get from the community center side to the other side. I mean, unless we're thinking of putting sidewalk on the whole east side. But
I don't know,
I
but
don't know.
crosswalks and where they're gonna be located
Right.
is part of the design that's being, the engineering and
And we
design.
have an engineer, right?
Right, we have- yeah.
But Michael, that might reduce the cost if we're trying to only,
That's a
you know,
thought.
get to the part where the sidewalk picks up on the other side.
And that would be great if it's the safest option,
right.
Yeah, absolutely, but,
so
I mean, in terms of crosswalks.
I'm not gonna compromise safety,
No, we're
Right
not
now we
asking
are,
you to.
right?
so.
And to that point too, in terms of the order, again, of things, I mean, maybe it should be reconsidered whether High Street comes next or Cedar Street, because Cedar Street, again, we have students walking to the high
To the
school
high
over
school,
there.
yeah.
And,
Well,
and have we ever looked at, you know, sidewalks that approach schools?
Yeah, I think what we'll have to
During-
do to make West Union Street happen is take the money that was gonna be part of High Street and move it to,
The concern
West
with
Union.
Cedar Street, right, is it's a scenic road, and there's gonna be a lot of either
it's a little
takings
difficult.
or design or between stone walls and trees and, you know, all kinds of stuff for Cedar
Right.
Street.
I do think some preliminary work though has already been done for Cedar.
We did some work already, we started looking
Yeah,
at that.
and the other, I mean, there's a section nearer the end of, towards the high school where Union Street so we could prioritize.
Right, that's either land takings.
Yeah, so we could
Yeah.
prioritize
Oh,
that
yeah.
section.
But
Yeah.
I will say this, you know, and I appreciate everybody's thoughts. Our DPW is slammed.
Oh,
I don't disagree.
Well,
well,
everybody says that, and then everything else becomes a priority.
no.
So we need to respect them, we need to respect the work they do, and we need to respect their time with their families, and their energy.
Speaking of, there's sidewalk work being done on, nope, Pleasance? Not Pleasant.
Yeah, there's a bunch of.
That goes toward you
corners.
guys. Is that us or is that the state?
That's the state.
Okay.
You're talking about on Corderville?
Yes, Corderville. Yeah.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah, there's some sidewalks being fixed there. I've been noticing that as I
Are
drive.
those ADA compliance, because it looks like they're making.
I think they are.
I think they
they're
are, because they were
making
doing like some ramps and stuff
Yeah.
too.
So,
Okay,
all right.
but that's the state work. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
So-
that's another venue too. That's how Framingham were able to get all their sidewalks in, under that ADA compliance federal grant monies.
The state can't
Yeah,
do
and-
anything for us on 135?
No, it's our,
We own-
that section is our road,
Yeah.
Which
so.
they're still not sure of 100%.
It's really weird. It's like little small slivers are the state, and then some are.
It's funny.
Like Florida.
All right,
Like
so
Florida.
where's this conversation leaving us? So I think we're moving ahead on the West Union, you're gonna have the engine. Do we have, is this a consulting engineer that?
Yeah.
So they'll come up with a plan, we'll look at it at some
Yeah.
point, hopefully soon.
I just don't know if they can move any quicker.
Well,
I know we
And,
love them
If they
too.
Well,
can we have a I'm sorry, can we have that conversation with the school committee about making a temporary stop there for the kids to get picked up?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And we as a board will not be looking at the plan for the sidewalks on 135, will we? It'll be,
That'd be nice.
it'll be
yeah.
well, I would
You
think.
should probably,
Yeah.
See it,
see
but
it.
it's DPW and Traffic Safety Committee, they're gonna look at the safety issues and,
Sure.
and we'll maybe, give it our blessing, but
Yeah.
we
That's
don't
what I
know
was
about,
thinking, yeah.
okay, okay.
Um,
I don't wanna hold anything up because we feel like we have to have a discussion and we're not moving forward.
Yeah, nice to get an update. And so, then the other one you had on your list was High Street, right? But then, are we having some discussion about changing the priorities, or?
like I said, I think probably to do the West Union Street piece, we're gonna have to take the funding that
All
was
right,
for
so then
High
what does
Street.
that mean for High Street and Cedar Street? and
Well, High
what's
Street, we'd
scheduled?
have to push it off.
So then, given the latest, I think what you're saying, given the latest estimates that we're looking at West Union for next year, but after that, we're not sure at this time what else is next on the schedule, or what we have ARPA funding for, or?
Well, we don't just have to use ARPA funding. We can look at, other pieces too.
Well, and I also think to Brandy's point, right, and complete streets and all these other things, if West Union isn't gonna get done until next year sometime, we're not gonna be looking at doing High Street or Cedar Street for at least another 6 or 9 months after that. So as we're working on the comprehensive plan, we're working on, I'm sure Doug, knowing Doug, he has a long-term plan for stuff. At some point, we'll come back and reevaluate and say, okay, where are we seeing the pinch point?
That's the problem. Doug doesn't have time to do long-term plans.
Oh,
I told you, we're doing so many things, we're not doing anything well. And it's impacting our ability to anticipate things coming down the road. I mean, what are we gonna do about fields? That, obviously, that's not like a public safety issue, but I've probably had more complaints about fields in the last 2 weeks than, anything else.
what kind of complaints?
Which is about the maintenance of them, scheduling issues, which isn't necessarily, in our domain.
Who's
but
in charge of it now?
DPW.
Oh.
Even the
that's right.
scheduling is DPW? I thought the schools don't schedule their own?
Well, the schools will schedule the school teams, but then they have the right to bump whoever is scheduled there.
Oh. Which is why we're looking at a Parks and Rec department who
Yeah.
can take over
So we
some of
talked
that
about
from
that, okay.
DPW.
Partially, but
and-
we got dams we gotta worry about. There's all some, all kinds of
DPW
things.
takes care of all the maintenance of the fields too?
Pretty much, yeah.
The school department doesn't take care of any of theirs?
No.
Oh, that's,
DPW takes care of the trash. They take care of the maintenance of the fields.
Maybe-
Sometimes we have, like, some of the youth organizations will help take care of things. And
So,
like
is
Joey
it-
does some stuff, like, for one of the fields, a couple of the fields.
Is it possible that that's a discussion that needs to be had with our schools? That,
It does.
that trash, the minimal day-to-day, obviously they don't have the equipment to mow the lawns and to do that kind of stuff, but do we really need to be sending our public works people out to pick up the trash around a football field or around a baseball field or?
Well, I will say Jim and John Murray have tried to help with that, but there's some, I'm not sure about this, but I think there's some contractual arrangements that may prevent some staff from being able to do the trash, and so we're kind of left up to doing it.
Maybe it's time to
The fact of the
re-
matter is, I can attest to, the school department doesn't have the bodies to do field stuff, right?
Yeah.
I
Right.
mean, we can't even put people in the schools to clean them at the end of the day, so I certainly know that was the case at Mindess, so these jobs are challenging, right? You want to talk
Yeah.
about not making a lot of money and trying to live, and it's hard to live
Yeah.
around here and then have
So-
these jobs.
So what do we want to do with this question? Is this another future agenda item, or do we want to, is there some?
I think
like,
a
what's our
lot of this
road here?
will be discussed during the comprehensive planning process.
Oh.
And-
Do you
That's
really
it.
think we'll get into the details of who handles the
Yeah,
trash
I don't
at the
see
No, but I
fields
think,
and?
but I think it will help us prioritize what we talk.
But that's very
like,
long-term,
Which ones that we,
Right, but isn't there an interim,
yeah.
reach out to the school and Jim and say,
Jim and I tell you, we've had very candid conversations, Jim and I. We've had a lot of them over the summer
Right.
because when we were talking about Cedar Street, it's actually put a strain on mine and Jim's relationship. And he's got the same issue
Yeah.
that we do.
So are
We
you
don't
s-
have enough bodies in DPW, administration, police, fire, basically anything. And the schools can say the same thing about their staff.
Mhm.
So do you see this as a long-term project then? or
I've said
do
it
you-
it's been a long-term project. In fact, one of the projects that you wanted to do as part of the, when we did the retreat, is to do more of an organization, like a bigger
Part
organization.
3 Cemetery Department,
No, a bigger.
even larger.
Yeah.
Look at the whole organization.
Yeah.
Staffing
Okay.
analysis.
Oh, okay.
Staffing analysis.
But,
All right.
so that's not a
To
comprehensive
do that
plan
study
item,
to make
though.
sure,
that's,
okay.
the staffing is not a
So-
comprehensive plan issue.
Yeah.
No.
So,
But so if you come up with a plan, though, that says, okay, we need X amount of bodies, and it's gonna cost X amount of money, then that's a very frank discussion
Right.
that the community's gonna have to have.
Right, okay.
all right, so,
Okay.
all right, so let's go back to the sidewalks then, I think. So we have a plan, I think we have an understanding about West Union, and then the question, I think in terms of, I'm still thinking there's interim stuff to be done before the comprehensive plan comes out, which I presume will be a sidewalk plan with dates and things like that, right?
They
At some
can't do a
point.
full sidewalk plan.
No.
I
No.
think, during the comprehensive plan process, as we get feedback from the community, it'll be like, oh, well, really, we think it'd be good to have sidewalks here. And then that information might be put into a long-term plan about where we want them. And then based on what we're doing and where we have funding, how can we sort of marry those two lists and information?
So
That's my
I
feeling.
guess I thought, okay, so you're saying you guys are not seeing that out of the process comes a sidewalk plan with a schedule?
No.
Oh,
Okay,
no.
all right.
I mean,
All right,
and
so I
and
kinda
would,
thought
and I
there
would
would
be
be,
really
but-
careful about trying to come up with lots of plans
Yeah.
before we come up with a comprehensive
Yeah.
plan. Like, I feel like.
No,
just-
I'm thinking as part of the comprehensive plan, the end product would be,
No,
The-
we'll get
the end-
feedback on
the end-
open space, we'll get feedback
Oh, all right.
on
So
amenities,
we
we'll get
shouldn't-
The
feedback.
All
end
right,
product
so-
may be, one of the goals or one of the things might be ensure that there are sidewalks in these specific areas.
okay.
Yeah.
Potentially,
So
but
then I
that's
go
no
back, so my
specifics.
point right now is on an interim basis then, what are we doing in the next few years?
Well,
And-
I think to Michael's point, right, we're doing West Union Street because it's gonna cost more than we thought.
Yeah.
We're gonna do that first, and then my recommendation would be, once we do that, we sort of take another review and say, okay, based on either complete streets or access
right,
to
so let's talk about-
schools, then we go to that. But I think that's in 6 or 9 months, or 6 months once West Union Street is going. That's my suggestion.
All right, what are, anybody else think? I'd prefer to have something in place a little sooner than waiting,
Well, I
but
think
it's
because of the
not-
funding mechanism, because we're going to have, the West Union is gonna be more expensive, it's,
All right.
I think we're gonna have to wait. I think,
So
I think
all right, so
I think we're way ahead of ourselves if we start planning beyond West Union Street at this point.
Okay, and
Yeah, let's
pretty
get
much-
that done. Let's get it done.
All right, so
check it
I just
off.
want to just make sure that at some point we'll restart the process and talk about next priorities, maybe
Yes.
involved with complete streets, the chapter 90 funds, how that works, and, because I know Doug is he's prioritizing that when he knows those projects, so we should probably look at that.
Doug is going to whatever priority of the day is
Yeah.
at any different day. Whatever crisis,
Okay.
where
So,
it is.
just as long as we have an understanding, we're gonna kind of revisit this and try to do some, okay.
Let's move on, Mark.
Okay. Follow up on joint meeting with the planning board. So,
I wasn't there, so I can't.
oh, yeah.
We had a meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah, who wants to, I mean, I think it was, I thought it was a positive meeting, and we came out with just a few things. I think, and we had a discussion about naming a representative from the select board, so I don't know, I'll turn it over to you guys. And like, Joe, did you want to say anything about follow-up?
Oh, graciously, Claudia allowed me to.
Yeah, put your mic on.
Oh, sorry about that. I'll be representing the board when it comes to.
Sorry.
Ooh, that was a good catch.
Thank you.
When it comes to sit down and talking with Peter and being part of that group to do the things that need to get done, so.
Just to kind of give context, because this is in specifics to the MBTA communities and looking at options, we had talked, I thought Peter did a really great
He
presentation.
did.
And outlined
Yep.
the issues and outlined what our needs were gonna have to be to meet the MBTA communities law. I think that, the next steps is really seeing what options we have to comply with keeping as much control over the zoning, and just to kind of, anyone that's watching that wasn't watching our joint meeting, MBTA communities is really just a zoning exercise. We don't have to build any units to meet the state mandate for MBTA communities, but we have to zone for it, and it has to be by right. So we have to expect that anything that we do zone could potentially be built, but maybe we can look at areas that have already, like Cirrus has already been developed, other areas possibly have been developed, and we can plan to have a proposal or a couple different options for us in the planning board to look at that would meet the needs with the least impact on the community, I think is what we came to the conclusion on.
And it's, like you said, it's a change, paper change, more than anything else.
Well, hopefully. So you'll know, and so Joe, you're gonna be meeting with Peter and
Yeah, I'll be
Tricia,
meeting with
right?
Peter and Trish, yes.
at some point, and then
Yep.
are we still, we had talked about, I think, our first meeting in November as a potential, is that a good, for the report, that's, I
Well,
guess I'm
that
just
that may,
asking to
that may be
confirm that.
rather early.
Okay.
November
We might not have.
Remember, we had, I
Because
don't
I'm
think
looking
we
at
had
my
a
notes,
date.
I don't
Dates
see a date
around
on
as
that.
possibilities. What did you guys have? Anyway, we don't need to hold hard and fast to it. I think that was just some discussion of possibilities
No.
before we get into. What did you guys have for that?
I don't have a date for
There
when they're gonna
Okay.
come back
There
to
was,
us.
there was no date.
All right.
And I'm just gonna throw this out there. I mean, certain members of the planning board were trying to say that this is gonna be easy because we have these certain areas that we can just zone that way. You know, maybe part of Pleasant Street or this. My question is, what if we don't comply? Or what if we don't comply by December of 2024? Because it's a larger discussion, and with everything else we have going on in town, we can't come to an agreement or consensus. Just
I think,
thoughts.
we talked a little
I
bit
did,
about
yeah.
that. I think, the idea
I just wanted to
was
bring it up for this group.
we aim to do it, and then if we don't meet that deadline, the chances are it would be because a lot of communities can't.
Right.
But that certainly our goal would be to meet the
Yeah.
deadline.
Yeah.
And then I think, like, the ramifications of us not complying, I guess it depends on for how long. So if say we were, because we have to comply by December of next year, by 2024. If
12/31/24.
if we go to November town meeting and it doesn't pass town meeting and we have to push it and make changes or do whatever we need to do to bring it to, say, annual town meeting in the spring, that gap is not a huge gap. I guess it depends on kind of where your question is, because if we don't comply, we're not eligible for state grants, we're not eligible to,
Or at least that's what they're saying, right? But what if,
and possibly litigation from the Attorney General.
What
Our
if-
Attorney General has shown very clearly
what if
that,
Yeah.
what if the community doesn't support this? No matter what we do, and we have this great plan, and the community goes, but we don't want more zoning like this. We don't want to comply
Then
as a
they-
community.
Doesn't have to
That's
go to
always,
town
it's-
meeting.
that's what town
Right.
meeting's for.
Well,
So
that's what I'm saying, right? We're saying we should bring it to Springtown meeting, so we bring it to Springtown meeting and it gets voted, I mean, I don't know. And then we bring it to the fall of 2024 and,
I do
I don't
think
know.
it's, I think it's our
Spring?
responsibility.
Spring? Is that what you
We're
talked
Yeah,
about?
we're
thinking
talking about spring,
aspirational.
yes.
it
It's
was saying
aspirational.
if we could bring it to the spring, the first time
was-
to the spring 2024, to the annual, and then should it not pass or should it need to get tweaked, then it could go to the special town meeting in 2024.
And I guess it's up to us to create something that we can communicate to the public that isn't going to impact them in a huge way. And I think if we communicate that and we're able to show that, that's on us and the planning board to kind
Yeah.
of craft.
To work
And I
that
thought
out.
people
Yeah, to
were
work that out.
pretty optimistic about being able to put together an acceptable plan. But of course, we won't know until we actually come up with something and see it concretely. But we had like a number of different kind of scenarios, so
The other thing
hopefully.
we discussed was that they did not want to jeopardize the downtown area with this, with the zoning changes. They didn't want to see that.
We didn't come to consensus on that.
No, we
Jeopardize the town what?
The zoning downtown.
We
Didn't wanna
said,
change
we
the
had mentioned
downtown
that
zone.
as like something that, if we could avoid that, we should.
Well, there was one planning board member that
Yeah,
was
Anna
very
was
strong.
very
Right,
adamant
right,
about
and
it.
that, you
But I'm
know,
just saying, we didn't come to consensus.
But there was also discussion, I mean, and early on with the MBTA, it's like, oh, when originally they said it had to be within a half hour of the train a half mile of the train station, we had brought up, and it was mentioned in our response,
Yeah.
that, well, we might not have the space in a half hour, so, in a half mile, so could it extend further out? And that's why they changed it from just a half mile around the train station to allowing it to be in other up to, you know, a certain percentage in other locations of your community, because we were looking at the Mills project as potentially helping us because of the density that building was gonna have.
And Joe, one thing I'll remind you, I suggested multiple scenarios. So when you guys go to give people some choices, you know, like to the downtown question. I'm not sure what exactly her objection was to that, but, you know, have a couple scenarios. That's how I'd put it together, and people can kind of look at it and say, hey, you know, but I thought it was generally positive, and we got a direction to move in, and all right. And the only other thing that did come up was we also talked about other interim close-term actions we might want to take before the comprehensive plan, whether it's zoning or housing. And I think there was kind of a consensus, a lot of discussion about housing, maybe inclusionary zoning, but that is also something under consideration.
So I kind of thought about that afterwards, and I know housing is a big issue. I know inclusionary zoning. I mean, like I said, we got it to the 5-yard line. We got it all the way to the planning board for a public hearing right before it went to town meeting, and the planning board had some major concerns about some of the things around the inclusionary zoning. So we had decided not to bring it to town meeting.
Yeah.
We could have still brought it to town meeting, but that's another story. But, you know, I do really feel like I want to be careful about what we do in sort of an interim way before our comprehensive plan is completed, or at least directionally where we're going with the comprehensive plan, because I think anything that we do that undermines the work that our consultants and our team are doing really runs contrary to why we're doing the comprehensive plan. So I would just caution
Sure.
things like interim zoning and things like that.
I would second that.
Other,
So who would be doing the
Well-
interim zonings?
the what?
Like, if you're talking about an interim zoning, who would be doing it?
Oh, so, you know, I just threw out, were there certain issues that people thought were more short-term? By that I meant, like, within 3 years that we should think about doing, that we see as things that are lacking. There wasn't a lot of really concrete, specific stuff. Tricia talked about some tweaks, which I think, in some ways, the planning board kind of does that anyway. Like, every year, they seem to be doing something. So she talked about that, and some of it had to do with, as I recall, certain type of uses. So things, not, in my mind, huge, big picture things. So that was one thing. And then, you know, we did talk a lot about housing, and Joe talked about inclusionary zoning, I think. So those were kind of the things I remember as being identified. So I asked kind of like, so what else have we got short-term? Because we're leaders here, and we've got all these housing issues. What do we think is short-term? I did not get a lot of concrete, specific things other than those. So maybe there'll be other things. So we did talk generally about continuing that process. But I don't know. Joe, did you have anything to add? What's your thoughts now on this?
There's going to be a lot of work that needs to get done, number one. Well, to sit down and make a strategic plan as to how we want to deal with this zoning change, whether it be written.
You talking about the MBTA or the other
MBTA,
stuff?
well,
Oh,
first of
okay.
all, the MBTA,
Yeah.
you know, that aspect of it. Other planning, I mean, that's part of the comprehensive plan, and I hope it gets done that way.
All right, so you're,
So-
sounds like you're kind of shifting, and, I mean, not shifting.
Well, I'm not
but-
shifting, but it just, affordability and affordable housing to me and inclusionary zoning are one and the same for me. And I said it at that last meeting, that, you know, if we had an inclusionary zoning bylaw, that would have been a great tool for the planning board to use when a developer comes into town and threatens a 40B. Well, guess what, folks? We have inclusionary zoning. If you can't go by these bylaws, and then find another town that's willing to accept you.
Okay.
You know, I'm tired of Ashland having to bow down to these people coming in and saying, this is what we're going to do, and you can't do anything about it.
Well, then we need to get either
Well-
in safe harbor or 2 or 10%.
Well, you're right, but every time if we only go 10% every time with these buildings, we're losing ground.
I agree 100%.
We're losing ground. It should be at least a minimum of 15, if not 20. And
So this was
we know
kind of
that's not gonna
discussion.
happen.
Inclusionary zoning's never gonna get that high, though.
No.
So inclusionary zoning is never going to be
But you can give a
20%.
baseline.
So
It
just
was,
real,
I think it was 12% was what we were aiming for,
So-
so just
to
real
kinda-
quick, I don't know how much Claudia understands. So with affordable housing, when an apartment building comes in, and let's say they have 100 units, and they're a rental, if they're only 10% affordable, you can only count the 10 units. If 25% are affordable, you can count all 100 toward your affordable housing number, which brings your percentage up. And it's interesting, after the planning board meeting, I realized how important it is that we and the planning board really keep that in mind about, it
Well-
has to, well, hold on, let me finish.
Yeah.
About 25%, because I remember sitting as a new member when Cirrus came in.
Yeah.
And someone said, well, we should do 25% affordable, we should really push for that. And I was new, I didn't understand, and we had some other people in place that were someone new. And so we only got 10% affordable. Had we understood better, or had we had more, I don't know what, if we had been able to do 25% affordable at Cirrus, we would have been at our 10%. I mean, granted, that's the past, but we need to learn from that. We need to learn that as we put any large projects in place, and to me, large is 10 or above. And I understand, Tricia said, there's other things to think about, sustainability, and I get that.
Right.
But for a community like us, where people don't want to see more housing, the quicker we can get to our 10% number, and we can have the safe harbor, and we can say to developers coming in, look, we want to work with you, like we did with Carlos. Not Carlos, with.
We tried with Carlos.
We tried with Carlos, and he decided
Yikes.
not to. But with
Sanudo.
with the project on Pond Street, and people got upset with us for allowing that. But because we did 4 units there, all 20 of them. Now, in looking it back, that's not a lot, but at least it's help. And then there's also that argument, well, that's not real affordable. And I get that, right? That if you only get you get 25%, so 25 of the 100 apartments, that doesn't necessarily meet the need, but it meets the requirements from a state perspective, and that gives us safe harbor. So could we use more affordable housing in Ashland? Of course. Could we find, other ways? Of course. But we are working within the state guidelines, and if we can push some of these other, it's unfortunate that Chestnut Street is not 25, if Chestnut Street was 25% affordable, that would have helped us a lot. If the Pond Street project, or is that one, the one with Ben
501.
Trask?
25.
501 Pond Street, so that's,
We
and,
were
but,
able to count on
Right.
120
and,
units.
that's Ben Trask, who has worked with us, right? Ashland Woods is 25%, so,
So,
anyway, that's.
Yolanda, that reminds me, one of the reasons I brought this up was that very factor where can we either have a policy or come to an agreement with the planning board that that's what's going to happen. We talked about, and so I think when we had that conversation, it kind of shifted into inclusionary zoning, which would kind of accomplish that on an official zoning. But is there another measure, whether it's a policy, agreed upon policy that both boards support? That's kind of what I was trying to get established.
Okay, well, see, and I don't think that was clear, right? Because when we brought up the fact that if we could make these 25%, and we brought up some of these other projects that had already, the Homer Street project, right? Let's see if we can work with, I don't know where that's at in the permitting process, but is it too late to say, can we do 25? But you have to do this initially, right? The minute the developer comes in with a plan that's 10 or more units, that needs to be.
So-
Right, well, it depends on how much control we have over
over the situation. Like when we
Right.
look at like what we did with UGC and we had a development agreement, we were able to
Right.
do that. And that was going to be a 40B anyway, and a 40B is always 25% affordable.
Correct.
So, you know, you think about those numbers, but I think part of it is like how much, what is the parcel size? Like how many units are they supposed to be
sure.
putting in? If is the community willing to increase the number of units, what that would support
Right.
increasing affordability to 25%? Like, so, you know, and that's a trade-off. So is there enough, like, I think one of the reasons, and I don't know the specifics, but I have a feeling one of the reasons 10 to 60 Main Street fell apart was because the financials didn't make sense anymore.
Right.
And lots of things changed, like, you know,
Oh.
interest rates have gone up and,
Right,
and,
right.
and the landscape is really different. But, like, you know, mandating 25% affordable for the mill building, to me, would be a slam dunk. But it's like, are we willing to have 225 units or 250 units in exchange
Very good question.
for
Yeah.
the affordability factor? And I think the planning board would say no.
Right.
So
Well, and I think that's where, you know,
And
to
we
your
could
point, where the difference
Yeah.
is, right? And, but again, part of our discussion at the meeting, and that's what we're doing, I mean, we could go on for a long time, and I don't think
Right.
we need to, right? Part of the discussion at the meeting, and this is to let Michael know, is that when we brought up the fact that there were a number of projects that they did not push to the 25% affordable, the response back was, well, we also have to think about sustainability was one that I remembered. I forget what else
Yeah,
she
a
had
lot.
said, but there was like 3 or 4 things. And I'm like, you know, maybe it was impact on the municipality, maybe it was schools, so. But, and I think some of this will come out in the comprehensive plan, but we are currently not at safe harbor, even though we
Right.
have a housing production plan, because UGC is not moving forward, we are
Even
no
if they
longer in.
move forward, we still have an issue. That's my understanding.
No, we have to do.
If they pull building permits, then we're,
Right, because it's, you have to
I
do,
thought
you
we
have to
needed
do,
even more.
no, you have to show growth.
No,
You have to show 0.5% growth
yeah, so with
every
the housing
year
Okay,
production
so there's
plan,
another
in the
threshold.
plan.
So
Yeah.
I guess I'll just,
With that.
so one of the things, I guess that was one of the things I was hoping that we'd at least think about a short-term strategy. And, you know, and that was kind of the continuing conversation. Maybe it's an overlay district or a few overlay districts where 25% would be helpful to get us to where we want to go. And we would have less of a disappointment, like why did the planning board not push for that when we thought they could have, if we have a coordinated kind of approach. That was kind of my hope there. So.
I mean, I don't want to speak for Michael and the staff, but I know that doing the comprehensive plan was sort of a huge trade-off to be able to do a lot of other planning things other than what's on the planning board's plate.
Correct.
So, like, there isn't the staff,
Yeah.
I don't think.
Yeah.
Maybe Michael will disagree
There's
with me,
not,
but I
no.
don't think there's the capacity to, like, create an overlay district or a couple
Right.
overlay districts.
People
And
seem-
I honestly
yeah.
don't think we should until we have a comprehensive plan.
Right.
So,
and
but,
realistically, you're not that far off, or we're not that far off from getting to that 10% number. In fact, I think
Are we at 6?
we're at a little bit under 5.
Okay.
Or excuse me, a little bit under 6. We're in
Okay.
the 5 range. But you have UGC waiting in the wings, so that's going to get you 180, right? We got 501 Pond Street, which when we're able to put that on, we will have 120 units.
Is that in our plan or not yet?
It's not. So it's approved. It hasn't made it to the list yet.
So it's not, so will we be in safe harbor? Will that get us to a certain percentage for a year so that we can, because isn't it once it's permitted or something, you can put it on your plan?
Well, you
on your
have to have a
housing production
regulatory
plan?
agreement in place.
Okay, so
So-
once the agreement's in place,
You can do that. And then really, if 10 to 60 went through at like 1,000 units, we would have been at our 10%.
not 1,000 units.
What did I say?
You said 1,000 units.
Oh my God.
Not that many people.
Probably 10.
And it's not even that late.
Well,
10%.
all right, so I guess, I mean,
So, Michael, 501 Main Street, I'm sorry. 501 Pond Street, is that 15?
No, it's 25.
It is 25, okay.
We pushed for, we pushed.
You pushed
for
it,
25.
okay. I just, I didn't remember that.
Yeah, so all 120 units will go towards the.
So are we, so is there, so thinking of even a short-term thing, is there a policy we should have in place so there's clear understanding? Or, so we can't keep criticizing the planning board if we don't have a clear policy that we're communicating.
We can encourage,
So how do
especially
we do
based
that, though,
on,
other
based
than-
on the, you know, what some of the planning board members said about trying to get interim zoning in before the comprehensive plan is done. I mean, they're obviously looking at something, so why can't we just encourage them? When you can, if something comes in, look at 25%. If it makes
Yeah,
sense.
shouldn't we make
Or
a
looking at
formal
some creative,
statement?
or looking at creative solutions, like either using the Affordable Housing Trust or
Right.
like CPC Affordable Housing
Right.
Bucket.
Don't take it
and
on,
being able
don't take it
to
upon their own
buy those
selves
units.
to do
Right,
it.
right.
We did
Yeah.
that with 12 Pond Street.
So we
Reach
can-
out to people.
There's
Uh,
options.
Right?
Yeah.
There were options, and we came up with a creative
Yeah,
plan
we-
to work
we-
on that, and it worked out pretty well.
The district only required 2 of the units to be affordable.
Right.
Right.
So 10%. So we talked about at the trust, you know, it suggested using some of that money to buy the affordability for 2 more units to bring us to 25%, which allowed us to put all 16 on there.
Right.
And the
So-
trust,
16.
trust supported that.
Again, those are tools. Those are, I'm sorry, those are tools that, again, if the planning board was willing and able to, you know, take on assistance and having to, you know, to make a decision.
I guess the one thing I would suggest, rather than making a policy or something like that, is, I think Michael's very supportive of looking at 25%. What, you know,
Yeah.
I would say, instead of making a policy, and, you know, maybe we can have individual conversations, but, you know, we don't want to necessarily put our, you know, what we think on the planning board. But from a planner perspective, I would say if Peter, when he looks at these projects, can recommend, or I don't know if that's possible, right? He can say, you know, we're trying to get to this affordable number, let's look at what if, and he can make that recommendation to the planning board and at least have the discussion.
Yeah.
He can put it forward, but it would be their decision.
Right,
planning
no,
board.
no,
That's
and
always
I understand it's
true.
their decision, but, you know, he can remind them, look, the Affordable Housing Trust is willing to work with us, you know, their support to get to our 10%. And again, if it's 100 units, 25% are affordable, we get it that they're not all really affordable, but it will help us get to our number, and it will give us safe harbor.
So it sounds like just, we're kind of looking at a staff solution, and which could potentially, so Michael and Peter, knowing how we're trying to view things or their own perspective, can help implement this process.
Yeah, I mean,
Sounds
I
like-
can direct Peter to, you know, recommend that. It's certainly something that, you know.
Can I ask if it makes so much sense why it's such a problem with the planning board? What's,
Well,
I'm missing something.
So one thing is density. So they're always gonna want, if you say 25%, they're gonna want to build X more units than they otherwise
The
would.
developer.
Yeah.
And they'll be
to make
denser.
their funding.
So that is an issue when you get into all sorts of other issues. And maybe there are other things that people want to negotiate with the developer. Maybe there's other priorities.
So then, but I'm asking about the planning board, so the.
Yeah, that's what I'm
So the
saying.
thing with the planning board would be that it makes it hard for them to negotiate with the developer because they want up the number. And,
So
And there
the
may be
planning
people
board-
saying density, we don't want density here, this is bad.
right, I
Yeah.
understand
Yeah.
that.
So
I
the
understand
planning
that.
board, like, starts with the zoning in that area.
Right.
So if there's a 10% overlay, then that's sort of the starting
That's the
point.
baseline.
So I have a question. We don't have any kind of affordable housing overlay anywhere, do we?
We have
No,
the
so
Pond
what,
Street
well, what you
Overlay
do, like
District.
you've got the Pond Street Overlay District, which has an affordability requirement.
Of
10%.
10%, okay,
Cirrus had, or excuse me, the RTD, I think, had
10%.
one of the components there. Wildwood, which is where 100 Chestnut Street is.
Right.
Yes.
that had a
10%, okay.
10%.
Yeah.
And
I-
that's how I'm sorry, that's how the developers say, well, no, your
Right,
overlay is
your only-
10%.
your overlay is
So
only
that's all-
10%.
So,
Right.
they're happy with that, thank you very much. It's-
Right.
It's already written
Right.
down.
Well, see, that's the issue.
But, I would, but it's a special permit, so
Right.
you could stand firm on the 25%, but, you know, the planning board wrestles with a bunch of different issues. I would suggest, and I don't think it's the time, I don't think we can do it right now, but I think at some point, collectively, you want to get all your priorities. Like when you're looking at a development, what are you looking at? Sustainability? You might be able to achieve your sustainability goals now just through the code, through the building code.
So that's it.
So then you could focus on other things that might be important to you, as like affordability and
Yeah.
public transportation, including those elements. But I would suggest at some point, and again, I don't know if now's the right time, but again, just kind of get all of those on paper and prioritize them. What's the most important to you? So.
Interesting, okay. Well, that's the follow-up discussion. So, okay. Okay, the next is the consent agenda, and I think, Randy, you had you wanted to pull
I'd like to
this
pull
regular
out
session
item
minutes.
A, the accept regular session minutes from September 6, 2023, pull that out of the consent, because I have one small edit.
Okay, I move that we approve the consent agenda minus item A.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. So there's a motion been made and seconded? Okay, all those in favor of accepting the consent agenda except for item A, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, consent agenda is accepted. So A,
So in the section where we, I know there were a lot of public hearings and a lot of movement on the meeting minutes for September 6th. In the section that is noted, that Mr. Sharon noted that they need to open the second public hearing and then we'll suspend to finish this discussion for Mike's Auto Sales for a change in location. There was a motion by Yolanda to open the public hearing, and then there was a motion to close. It says close the public hearing, so it should be suspend.
Suspend.
I just want to make sure that it's,
you guys got that?
Yeah.
so, one small edit, but easily, I get it. That it's,
So we have it accepted, so that change, the minutes with that change? A motion? Okay, all those in favor of accepting the minutes with that change, say aye.
Aye.
All right, minutes are adopted. All right, that gives us the town manager,
I was looking at those and I'm like, oh, okay, we're good.
this brings us to the town manager report. Mindess?
So first is related to the bond issuance that's coming up, or excuse me, I should say the ban issuance of, for this last round of funding for Mindess. So first of all, I think you did seem, you might not have seen my note today. I haven't been able to really check my email. I just kind of sent one. So S&P, we had our ratings call last week, and so we have been, they did their examination, so we have been reaffirmed at AAA with a stable outlook. So, and they pointed out some very, some key points, such as, so they have different criteria that they utilize to determine, basically what that is. And one of the things that they pointed out is that, we're an affluent community in Boston's western suburbs, and we continue to maintain our strong financial performance and robust management practices, which supports the AAA rating. So just to go through their criteria, one is the economy. So they rated us as a very strong economy. That's the highest you can do. Budgetary performance, that's another category. They rated us strong, which is the second highest. Budgetary flexibility, they rated us again at very strong. Liquidity, very strong again. Management, very strong. And then debt and long-term liabilities, they've rated us as adequate, which is, basically middle of the road. And that's really due to our OPEB and pension obligation. So anyway, congratulations to the finance team and yourselves and the FinCom and everybody who's done work on our policies and have followed up on it, because that's what leads to this rating, which will lead to us saving money. We're looking at about $17 million that we will go out for after once you look at after the MSBA reimbursement. So after you have to net it out. So what you anticipate the MSBA reimbursement coming in.
So, Michael, is that what the additional money's coming from the?
No, we haven't factored those in yet. So what Joe's referring to is that the legislature passed additional funding for existing projects that are in the MSBA program to handle cost increases. Many thanks to the Senate President and Representative Lewis for their work on that. And so we calculated it out. We could be eligible for 3.8 to 3.9 million more, which is significant. But we will go out to market on Tuesday, and so you'll have to sign the notes at your meeting on the 4th. Claudia, have you been through that you haven't been through that process yet.
I'm sorry, I'm distracted by my colleague.
No, I was just signing the notes. It's a really long and arduous process.
No, I have not been through that.
So, okay. But anyway, that's just an update on Mindess. I've got Mindess Opening on here, but I wasn't there. So, just congratulations to everybody. That was part of that building and getting that building open. And, I think all of you were able to attend, which I think is awesome, and a good ceremony. And then finally, the Attorney General decision. So, Brandy, you just made a comment?
Yeah.
So it's not a decision. They've asked some questions about Article 14 from the May 3rd town meeting, which was the net zero emissions in municipal buildings.
Yeah, right.
So they've questioned the constitutionality of that. So
Are they serious? And is this a serious thing or just some kind of, like what?
they asked Lisa to write an opinion for them, so Lisa's provided that.
Jesus, unbelievable.
It is getting almost silly, but
I wasn't sure if that was, sorry to interrupt, but I wasn't sure if that was just some kind of routine thing where they say that, but no, this is unusual. She's actually questioning its sustainability.
we've never had this
That's
before.
unbelievable.
So,
Wow.
anyway, and then just a couple of other items.
Well, before you go on, so
yeah.
so that's the response and.
So we're waiting for the Attorney General. So
Yeah, okay.
Lisa's has provided them the information that they've
Hopefully
asked
people
for.
had a chance to read through it. It was very thorough. I mean, a lot of work. to
Yeah,
like-
at least she can be thorough. And just
Yeah.
a
Okay.
couple of other things. We had movie night recently at the Corner Spot, and that was really successful. I think we probably had over 200 people. Thanks to Beth and Melissa and the ABA and all the sponsors who helped put that together. And then, Jen, do you want to talk a little bit about the holiday program?
So the Human Services and Community Center are once again planning for their holiday program. So that program is sort of twofold. They do a Thanksgiving dinner for families in need, and then they also identify people for holiday gifts, children for holiday gifts, and then we match them up with community donors. To date, we have I think 130 participants, meaning recipients of the program. It's just been 2 days since we started to really put out information to obtain the donors, and we already have 37 people willing. Certainly, we're always looking for people who want to either participate and provide the donations and gifts, but if you know families that are in need, just get in contact with the Human Services Department, and they can match your family and your children up with donors. This year, we're also, if anyone's interested in participating in making donations for the Thanksgiving meal, we're certainly looking for that as well. Since the pandemic, the Ashland Emergency Fund has really fully funded that program, and in previous years leading up to 2020, we did have people in the community that were donating parts or pieces of the meal, and that was super helpful, and it allows us to sort of stretch out the emergency fund's donation to the food pantry throughout the whole year.
And if people are interested in participating either for the Thanksgiving meal or for Christmas, what do they do to say, I'm willing to support a family?
So all they have to do is reach out to Human Services at ashlandmass.com, or if they don't have access to email, they can certainly just call the food pantry or actually anybody at the community center can help.
And it's full out human services at Ashland, Mass.
ashlandmass.gov. Yeah. And then Courtney or other staff would send you a Google form just to fill out sort of, there's options, you can either adopt a child and sort of do that, or you can do filler presents. So we found people feel more comfortable just sort of picking up things along the year and then bring them, and then we fill them in. Some people will do gift cards for teenagers. There's certain things that people feel most comfortable with, and we've tried to be a little bit more flexible than we have in the past, just to meet people where they are.
Quick question. Are we still utilizing the Boston Food Bank for some of the food supplies for Thanksgiving?
I don't know if we do it for Thanksgiving. That's how we get our food for,
For the yearly.
For the
yeah,
year. I think
okay.
there are pieces that they will provide that we'll certainly utilize. We have partnerships, and we reach out to the grocery stores.
Yep.
Last year, we reached out to Whole Foods and sort of tried to see if they're willing to give us donations, which many of them are, and then we purchase it
Okay.
with Ashland. Emergency Fund gives a donation as well.
Thank you.
Speaking of the community center, I wasn't able to make it to the community center reopening, but how was that? I don't know if other folks were
Great.
able
We
to
had
go. Was it good?
yeah, it was odd. We had 100 people.
Wow.
It was so busy.
That's
It was
awesome.
great to see, yeah.
It
Yeah,
looks and it does look great.
Oh my gosh, they did it's like refreshed.
Good job, yeah.
And I heard that, I don't know if it was from you or someone else, that as they were making some repairs, they found that there was stuff that might not have been done correctly the first time, so. But it was great, it looks really refreshed, and it's just really nice. You can tell the
Looks
people
great.
that go there all the time are very excited.
Yeah, they're super psyched, and then we were able to sign up about 20 new people who had never come.
Oh, that's right.
So that was one of the initiatives that Candy Wilson really wanted to do, is sort of bring new people in and sign them up, have the fob so that they can start to use the activities right away.
Yeah.
So
That's awesome.
it was
So
awesome.
Candy and her team did a great job of
They did.
putting all that together.
Yeah.
It's much brighter over there.
It's very bright.
Yeah,
Nice.
which is, I don't think I realized how dark it was until now.
You don't until
Now it's bright, and I'm like, oh,
I mean, I
wow.
thought they put in new woodwork, like new wood paneling. And it's like, no, but they just painted
Painted
it
it.
differently.
Yeah.
It's like,
It's a lot, yeah, it's a
Oh.
little less furniture too, so it feels a little bit
So
more
the-
accessible, yeah.
The items that were found subpar, were they corrected?
not all of them yet. So
But they're now on the list.
They're on the list.
so, and then just looking forward to Ashland Day on Saturday.
Oh, is that
And,
Saturday?
I just looked.
Yeah, but it's only Wednesday, Joe.
Joe, it's New England and it's Wednesday. It's true.
You're right.
Rain or shine?
Rain or shine.
So,
Rain or shine.
but that,
Everyone's.
yeah.
Not talking about
So that's what I have.
Okay. So I guess that brings us to board reports. So we'll start with Claudia. Go ahead. Work our way
All
over
right,
here.
just to piggyback on the community center reopening, I stopped by as well, and I think the one thing that I would have to say, really, the energy in that building was palpable.
That's interesting, yeah.
There was a tremendous amount of enthusiasm. There was all kinds of different things going on, and so it was very, very nice to see, and it looked beautiful.
Great.
I hadn't been over to the left in a long time when you go in the front door, so, but it was much brighter than what I remembered. I had the opportunity to stop and do a little Sending Sunshine last week with Natalia Melnick, and that was a nice event down at Corner Spot. It actually happened to be at the same time as, I think, the final night for, guests at the mic. It's not.
Open mic.
Thank you.
Open mic.
Open mic. And so it was nice, some nice background music, and there were, probably, when I was there were probably about 10 people who were filling out, making cards. And the hearts, actually, were there. And so, I managed to do a few. It helps if you could draw, which I can't, but,
The sentiment's there,
the
Claudia.
sentiment was there. And then I did attend the traffic study committee last week, and I just want to be clear that I do not in any way, shape, or form think that I understand how overworked many of our departments are throughout the community, that, and certainly the Public Works Department, they do a yeoman's duty, and there's always an emergency in Public Works. Always, right? So I just want to be clear that I certainly appreciate all the work they do, and, you know, I just raised some issues because I feel as though there are significant safety issues. And then last night, we had a school building committee meeting. This was the first in the new building. And, you know, I too was at the opening and gave tours all afternoon. They were, I think, 6 of us giving tours. It was one right after another. You know, hundreds. Jim thinks that probably about 1,500 people came through.
Oh, really? Wow.
That's awesome.
And so it was really nice. It was certainly a proud moment in our community. And, you know, again, a big thank you to our community for supporting it, and especially at the level that it was supported. And then just to talk briefly, just to reiterate a little bit about the amount of work that certain individuals put into making that building a reality for our community. I mean, initially, really, Jim had a lot of work to do, the legwork up front in terms of getting us into the whole SBA process. That's, you know, a significant amount of work, and it's huge, huge for the community, right? Millions of dollars. And it doesn't hurt that we have happen to have the Senate President in our community who, you know, does a lot of things that we benefit from. So, and then Dr. Kyra, who did really the yeoman's work on writing the educational plan. I think that, you know, the entire thing, the thing that's one of the most impressive things about the building is that every space was done with intention. Everything was intentional. You know, we lived in a building for many years that was maybe intentional when it was built in 54 and 56. But we didn't have intentional spaces for people to receive services or to meet in small groups, or so to be in a building where everything had been, you know, thoughtfully planned is really very, very unique, I think. And again, you know, like I said, Dr. Kyra did a yeoman's amount of work on that. And then, you know, finally, Paul Kendall. I mean, we should figure out something to name after him.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what, but, you know, maybe a geothermal well, or
Definitely something in that building needs to be
But
named
some-
after him.
I've got an idea, but
He just did you know, he's done a tremendous amount of work. I was in there one Saturday when he was in there going through room by room with a punch list and spotting, you know, the plate around the electrical plug was a little askew. I mean, there wasn't a thing that he missed, and hours and hours and hours daily. And then finally, just with regards to that, now they're trying to get the playground going before the weather gets cold. They need to get it up, and then it's some kind of a rubber base that will be underneath it. Has to be done when the temperature is 41 degrees and above. So they are really working as quickly as they can to try to be prepared to do that base prior to the weather getting cold at night. So. So I guess that's it for me. So thank you.
Randy, go ahead.
So a couple of things. Yolanda and I were over at the farmer's market last Saturday for office hours, and despite the cold, slightly rainy, pretty windy conditions, we actually had a lot of people come up and talk to us. So, you know, I just wanted to give a shout out to the farmer's market, and especially Jean Walker, who really kind of helped and coordinated all of this and made arrangements for us when we kind of came to her at the last minute and said we really would love to be able to do office hours there. So she really kind of helped us out quite a bit. So thank you to the farmers market and to Jean. I was also collecting items.
Excuse me, before you go on, are we scheduling more hours there? Where are we?
October 14th.
14th.
So
So Joe and Yolanda are going to
Okay.
be there
Well,
from 9 to
except-
11.
Well, I
Yeah,
can't
that's right. You
I
had
can
an
only
issue.
do 9 to 10. So if someone else could join Joe
October
from,
14th. I had a conflict, but let's keep that on
in the ship.
October.
Yeah, if it only is from 9 to 11 and it's
stay
okay.
Good,
Yeah, we'll be
October
okay.
14th, we'll put it on our schedule.
He can wing it by himself.
You're gonna be okay? All right.
I'm not afraid.
All right, so I interrupted you, Brandy. Go ahead.
But I was at Rob's house, I guess it was about a week and a half ago now.
Was it
for
that long?
like
Yeah.
an end of summer thing. And
Yeah.
I was talking to Representative Jack Lewis, and really, I was with my friend Maggie Masoki from area, and both of us were talking to Jack and Rebecca Carter from Home to Homes, and about the humanitarian crisis that's happening in Framingham right now. I know some of us have probably heard about
right.
migrants and refugees coming to Massachusetts. And Framingham has taken on a number of refugees that they are housing and trying to get the kids into schools. And, you know, these are families that are literally coming to our country with nothing. And so area had had put the word out, and I did as well. Area had collected 3 carloads worth of items, toiletries, coats, clothes, shoes, and I took over a carload today to the shelter from all the generosity from everyone at the farmers market on Saturday, so which was heavily appreciated. My friends at Smock, who I've been working with, they are very appreciative of all the generosity of our community. So I know Area is putting together one more collection, and the drop-off is going to be by next Friday, the 29th. So I can get information to anyone who is looking for what to bring or where to take it, and I can provide that to folks. But
It'd be good to know. We can get it out there, push it out there.
So it's
Did
very.
you say by next Friday?
Yes, by the 29th, so. And just a couple other quick things. Our comprehensive plan steering committee meets tomorrow. Yolanda and I and Michael and the gang will be meeting with our, the gang of 29.
The gang of 6. The gang of 29.
We'll be meeting with our consultant, J.M. Goldson, who we had interviewed for our kickoff meeting with them, and I'm excited to kind of really get our hands around what this project is going to look like. I think they're going to be great for our community, so I'm excited about that. I would encourage folks that, we have the room in the library at 7 o'clock, or we start at 6:30. We're going to start with the consultant at 7 o'clock. I would encourage folks to connect on Zoom. It's a public meeting. We want people to be informed. It's not a public forum, so it's not a time for the public to be able to interact with the consultant or the group. I just want to make sure we set expectations, because I know community involvement's great and we want people to be engaged, but we just also want to make sure that the public realizes that this is our first meeting with the consultant, and that's the primary focus for the meeting. So, and just the last thing, where we talk about the food pantry. A simple gesture is doing a collection this upcoming Saturday. It's a great way to be able to donate to our Ashland Food Pantry. If folks want to sign up, basically you put a bag of items out on your front porch or by your mailbox on a bi-monthly basis, and it gets picked up and taken over to the community center, and you can sign up. If you Google Simple Gesture Ashland, they will drop off a bag to you, or you can just put out a paper bag full of stuff this Saturday, and it's a great way to easily give to the Ashland Food Pantry. And that is it for me. So, thanks.
Thank you. Joe?
You put it out in your front.
Oh, okay.
You're gonna call it.
No.
They drive through your neighborhood, you give them a call? Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Briefly, we've had a couple of meetings with the traffic study committee group, talking about a bunch of issues that pertain to safety and sidewalks, speeding, that we've had issues with on East Union Street, Cedar Street, lower level. Traffic studies were done. We're going to do another traffic study in that area again. Some of the residents were not really believing that the figures that they had were accurate enough.
Where was
But
this, Joe?
this was East Union Street by Cedar Street and Higley Road. This was it was a 14-day study that was done, and the amount of traffic that was going through that specific area was over 67,000 cars in 14 days.
What?
67,000 cars in 14 days.
Well,
Yeah,
Waze now sends people that way from our side of town.
I understand that.
To miss
and-
126.
And that's where the traffic issue is coming from Framingham, coming in this way. So, yeah.
There was a
I already
detour,
did-
too.
I already
There was
did-
route- There was a detour routing people that way.
Right.
So once people learn.
Especially off of Higley,
It's like,
that they
like
came
everybody
down and
learned
around.
about Cherry Street dumping out onto Pleasant right there at the corner. And everybody does that now,
Yeah.
too.
So those, that came, so that study was done via DPW and Kevin, so I appreciate all the effort that he put into that. So now they're going to, we're gonna redo that test, that study again, and hopefully we have better results. So that, and then Affordable Housing Trust will be meeting on the 28th. Summer hiatus is over with. We've been working individually, trying to find new ways and new things to get people to be affordable and try to build with us and work with us. It's not easy. It's not easy. As Jason said earlier, that people want to make money, and this is the time to do it. Nobody wants to leave money on the table because we're looking for, affordable housing. So with that, Habitat for Humanity will be working with us closely, and hopefully we can get something off the ground sooner than later. So we're keeping our fingers crossed with that. And then, like Michael said, Ashland Day, the 35th annual celebration will be this Saturday. Starts at 10 o'clock to 4 p.m. And all the vendors, we're shy 28 vendors from we had 2019. So we have actually 70 vendors, which I'm really happy to see that, after a 3-year hiatus, that, the interest is back. So, yeah. And, 2 with COVID, and then last January, we said, there were still traces of COVID, and we didn't want to take any, unnecessary chances. So we said, no, we'll give it another year. And little did we know that the vaccine was going to work. But anyway, long story short, we're here.
Great.
It's a little smaller version of what it is, but we have a lot of food vendors this year, from Mexican, Italian, Indian cuisines, sandwiches. Lions Club will have the food tent there. They'll be doing breakfast and all the different types of sandwiches. And I understand that they may be doing a lobster roll.
Oh, wow.
Who's doing a lobster roll?
The Lions.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
So come on down.
And there's new ice cream vendor.
And we have new ice cream vendor, Legendary, and it's Legendary.
No, I meant
And Sub-Zero,
The
too.
Sub-Zero is
Right?
going to
Yeah,
be
that's
there.
their name.
Oh, really? I
That's-
didn't know
that's
that.
their name, yeah. Yeah, it's called Legendary.
Oh,
See?
Oh.
That's their,
oh, okay.
Yeah.
Did not know.
see, so.
They're the new folks that are
Yeah.
going to be moving
Nitrogen,
into
yeah.
next to Next Pizza.
Yep.
So
Yep, and they'll be there. Nick's Pizza will be there. Pizza Mine, Pizza Palace will be there. All different types of sandwiches and stuff. So come on down. Yeah, if you're hungry, that's the place to be. So
Come hungry.
we're looking at it, and we have 6 rides, a couple inflatables, but hopefully we don't have wind because anything over 35 to 40 miles an hour, they won't inflate. So
Joe, I went
We'll
into
keep-
labor on your first Ashland Day.
Wow.
That's how I remember when it got
Oh,
started.
that's funny.
oh, when it gets started, we had army tents. We used those damp, dreary, brown-colored cloth that weren't waterproof. and they had the tents up, and it's pouring. And you could have just stayed outside, the tents, because now you're inside a wet, hot, damp tent.
Sounds like the summer in general.
Yeah, but that was in fall. So anyway, but those were fun days. Those are fun days, and, we're still going at it, and, the motto is still the same: take part and be proud. We have two very distinguished recipients for the Citizen of the Year and Field Marshal, and those are surprises, but I think people will be very happy to see those individuals and a group get the award. So keep praying for good weather, and I'll see you guys all on Saturday.
Yeah.
So thank you.
I'll be reading the proclamation, yeah.
You shall.
Honored to do so.
Thank you.
Right.
Just a couple things. I want to second everything that Claudia said about the Mindess and the project and the people that worked on it. It's been an honor to be part of that group and to see the building come to fruition. We still have some work to do with the fields, but it'll be nice. And the turnout for the opening was great. Select board office hours, as Brandy said, it was great talking to different people and hearing their concerns. And what I love is every time I go, I feel like we get more feedback. More people come in and are willing to talk to us and give us their feedback, so that was good. A couple of things coming up. So the Metro West Regional Collaborative, we've sort of taken the summer off. We're having our first meeting in September. It'll be Thursday, 9/28 via Zoom. We start at 8 a.m. till 9:30. So if anyone's interested in coming and listening and seeing what it's about, let me know and I can send you the registration link. Yep. And then this is not just for Ashland, but the Haunt is coming in October. This is a joint celebration haunted town between the Metro West YMCA and the Hopkinton Center for the Arts, where they are creating a haunted town at the Metro West Outdoor YMCA. There's about 7 or 8 little vignettes. You come in and you walk through. There's the bed and breakfast. There's the town hall. There's a library. There's a bunch of other stuff. So a couple things. One, start looking for tickets. That'll be happening the weekend of Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So the 27th, 28th, and 29th. Leading up to Halloween. So maybe don't go Friday, but go Saturday or Sunday. But the other thing is they're still looking for volunteers. So if you love Halloween, if you love dressing up, they're looking still for people for some of the vignettes, as well as to help with parking and ticket sales and just directing people. So if you're interested, reach out to Kelly Grill at Hopkinton Center for the Arts, or reach out to me and I can connect you with her, and GreavesY at ashlandmass.com. But yeah, that should be a lot of fun, and I will be there all 3 days helping out. So
Great.
And that's it.
And will you be in costume?
I don't know if I have to be yet. We'll see.
I think Kelly says you're going to.
Am I gonna be? Okay.
Great.
I thought I was gonna be behind the scenes, and she's like, "Oh no. We've incorporated, so I'm gonna help manage timing and stuff, some of my production work." And she's like, "Oh no. People are gonna see you." So I'm like, "Okay, I gotta start figuring out a costume."
Well, thanks,
And that's
Yolanda. No one mentioned Porch Fest, which I know is going on, but I don't have the details. Is it next week?
It's
When?
the September 30th
Okay.
from 3 to 4 or 3 to
Sounds exciting.
3 to 5, and then it's closing out at the corner spot with the Road Dog. So
Yeah. And I got an invitation from, I think, Helen and Tony Lewis on, did you guys get that one? It's there, so they're hosting. Yeah, the Washington Street. So I don't know, there's all sorts of stuff going on. So check that out. That's September 30th. I also attended the community center reopening and the Mindess. So that's a lot of great projects at the same time. So that was great. I did want to call attention, just to, we got those funding letters from Representative Lewis and Senator Spilka. So it was really exciting news. Great, so wanted to thank them for their efforts. One thing close to my heart was, Representative Lewis had got through the budget. Is it $175,000? I didn't have it in front of me, but for the trail, $150,000 for the Upper Charles Trail specifically in the state budget. So that was great to see. So we all got that, I think.
specifically for Ashland
Yes.
Trail? Okay, perfect.
Yeah,
Very nice.
yeah, very nice. Yeah, good for him for
So
getting it
just,
through.
just one question. Would you like me to, write up some correspondence back.
Oh, that's a good
For the
idea.
board.
I think
Thanking
so.
them?
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, thank you for that. And the only, oh, and just an update, we did, representatives of the Upper Charles Trail did meet with the school committee, was it last week or the week before? I and Tony Lewis, did you watch? Yeah. And Judy Rosenthal, and actually it went very well. Tony spent some time reviewing with them, and it actually been, I couldn't believe it, was something like 6 years ago that they had appeared before the school committee. And he went through the whole trail and asked about support in the high school, trying to route it, and he went briefly through the different routes, possible scenarios to go through the high school. And they were very receptive. They had their concerns, and in the end, they did pick, one of the members volunteered to work with the Upper Charles Trail Committee to help route the trail. Does anybody have a guess who that would be? Yes, it was Paul.
I can see, right, he has free time, and
Yeah.
he does a lot of bike riding, like he does
Yeah,
trail
so
riding and
it
stuff
was
like
great.
that, so.
So it was
Perfect.
it was a very positive meeting. They were very supportive. They had issues and concerns. It's not going to be easy, but, so that was a good
So
thing.
the good news, Rob, now with Paul Kendall on, you're gonna get a trail.
I know, exactly. Exactly. Anyway, so that's, so that's my report. So I guess I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
One, before you do.
Sure.
This just slipped my mind. When you swing by Saturday at Ashland Day, if you see my better half, wish her a happy birthday.
Okay.
I don't want to tell her how
Good
old she
reminder.
is because she'll probably kill me, but,
Yeah,
now she will. But swing by and wish her a happy birthday.
we'll do that.
Thanks.
It's a
All
couple
right.
days before my birthday, too. It's a couple days before my birthday, too,
Oh,
so.
all right. We'll do the same for Yolanda. All right.
Motion to adjourn.
I will second that.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank
See you
We're
Saturday at
adjourned.
Ashland Day.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thanks, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Thanks for putting